Welcome to another edition. Well, that was nice. Welcome to another edition of AV Rant. I'm Tom Mantry, Associate Editor of Audioholics, and apparently my voice is changing.
Oh, very good. Well, I am Raw H. This is AV Rant. It's your home theater and AV questions answered. It's appropriate that for the very last show of 2015, we change up our intro.
Well, I squeaked. You didn't hear me squeak? I squeaked.
I was trying to open my Coca-Cola, so
Oh,
I
okay.
was distracted.
I squeaked. That was weird. It's very odd to squeak like that. I don't normally squeak. I don't really have a fairly deep and consistent voice.
That's right. Yeah.
Yeah, I was like, welcome to AV Rant.
It's a special time, boys' life. Well, Merry
Yes.
Christmas, Tom. I hope Christmas was good to you. We had a good time over at my place. My niece did go
Yeah.
absolutely ape for her pink Disney Magic Clip dress dolls that nobody knew I was getting, but I got. Thanks to James.
Thank you,
Yay.
James. Listener of the week. Yay, James. Uh yes, we had a good Christmas. It was a camping type Christmas. Apparently,
Mm.
Santa's very interested in us in all going camping and bought us a bunch of camping equipment. So
Mm.
I am not the biggest camper in the world, but my wife really likes it and the kids like it, and I can handle it for like 2 or 3 days. But I am a car camper. I'm not hiking in anywhere to camp.
Mm-hmm.
Funny, I'm a rock climber, so I like to climb, but I
Mm-hmm.
like to drive up to a rock, climb it, and then drive away from the rock. I don't
Yes.
have to walk too far between the two. I don't have to sleep outside in order for that to happen. But yeah, so it was good. It was good. The kids got a lot of stuff that they were like, "What?" We're like, "It's for camping."
Nah.
Oh. But they did get a lot of stuff they liked. We got a game for a game for the Xbox, a Dragon Ball Z game because they wanted the fighting game. They don't make Super Street Fighter 4 or 5 or whatever it is for the Xbox One. So they got that. They're excited about that. And yeah, overall it was good. It was a good Christmas. And it was a late Christmas for us because my wife didn't have a job, so we weren't sure. And then the very last minute she got a job, we're like, oh, better go shop. So
Yep.
Amazon was delivering for days and days. Like the Amazon, the mail person was like, "Yeah, I wish I had stock in Amazon because oh my god,
Yeah.
I am delivering so much Amazon right now."
Yeah. You gotta love the new version of Christmas. I bought a few things at stores. It's in the within the last couple of days, right before leading up
Yeah,
to it, but the majority was certainly purchased online. So.
it was all Amazon, and then there was a couple of last minute purchases at Target for just little things, and I actually went clothes shopping for my wife.
Mhm.
All that stuff was just stuff we needed. So she needed some more work clothes, and she was complaining that she didn't have a jacket, like a light jacket, for those. It's like it was 81 degrees here today. It was just ridiculous. It was so hot. We're supposed to get down like oh, a cold snap is coming on Saturday. It's going to be 65. My wife's like, oh, it's going to be 65. I think it's been too cold to go mountain biking. I'm like, it's 65. It'll be fine. Throw on a jacket. You'll want to take it off halfway through the
A
ride.
light windbreaker, yes. Well, if any of our listeners got something cool, something AV and home theater related for Christmas, feel free to let us know on our Facebook page. Did get some nice messages on Twitter and email over Christmas from people just writing to say Merry Christmas. So that was very nice. So thanks
That was.
everyone who did that. It's
I did
it's
buy my kids all headphones, all the same Sennheiser headphones,
ah,
because they keep losing them. So I got
uh-huh.
them some cheap $20 ones. I haven't listened to them yet. I need to do that. I haven't listened to them yet, but yeah, they're all. I'm like, the stuff like, oh, they're kind of cheap and they're plastic, and I'm like, I don't care. Do
Mm-hmm.
they play? And they have like a ridiculously long cord. It's
Mm.
like forever. I'm like, that's if I had known that, I might not have bought them. But
Ah,
the kids love them.
good for tripping.
My oldest son has nothing but trouble. So New Year's is coming up. So happy New Year's
Yes.
to those of you that are listening to this after the New Year's. And
Mm-hmm.
one of the reasons the podcast started a few minutes late because I was on the phone planning New Year's Day celebration stuff because that's what we're gonna do. Not gonna do New Year's Eve. I'm working. So all that. All right. Anyways, let's do our listeners of the week. Well, actually,
Mm-hmm.
let's do AV. This is AV Rent, the podcast where we answer your home theater and AV questions. In order to get your question answered, all you have to do is ask. Email us at rob@avrant.com, tom@avrant.com, or question@avrant.com to get our producer, Austin, who will send your question to us, which he's doing a very good job of doing. If he notices that you don't CC everybody, it's best to CC everybody, but if you are only going to send it to one person, send it to Austin. That way it will come out. It gets in the question list of the week.
Yep.
You can also go
Question
to
at avrant.com. That's the
That's
one.
right. You go to www.avrant.com to leave us a comment. You can go to facebook.com/avrant podcast, where you will not only get responses from us, but you'll get responses from our very knowledgeable listeners,
Mm-hmm.
which is very helpful. So a lot of times, if you have really pressing questions, I would post them to Facebook. Like you're like, I don't care if this gets on the podcast or not, but I need to know. I'm about to buy this. Should I buy it? That's a good place. That's a good resource there because our listeners also chime in. On Twitter, it's at First Reflect for Rob, at avrant_Tom for me, and at Austin Pond, Austin TEN Pond for our producer Austin, who has a podcast as well. The podcast is called We Watch Movies. It's a podcast about bottled water. It's a
Ooh.
review podcast about bottled water, the taste, the flavor, the consistency, the clarity, the
Mm-hmm.
bottling, the marketing, where it comes from, a little bit of research about all that stuff. So
There really is a guy who claims to be a water sommelier. So it's right up that guy's alley.
yeah, that guy right there is the listener for that podcast. The listener. We watch movies. All right. We did have some listeners of the week this week. Become a listener of the week. There's two ways to do it. First way is that you can go to www.avrant.com and click on the Buy Us a Cup of Coffee link. There you can give us a PayPal donation, and PayPal will accept either from your a transfer from your PayPal account or a credit card, which they will take a percentage of and give us the rest. We got one of those from Todd, who gave us a donation, and so did Herb from Cross Spectrum Labs. So thank you
Mm-hmm.
both for that.
Thank you guys. We
I'm waiting
appreciate
for you.
it very
Yes.
much. Yes, yeah, that's it.
So
I'm trying to prep for future questions.
I know what you're doing. So is this Tony? That's his name, right? It's Tony C. Is that what it's supposed to
Yeah,
be?
Tony C. Yeah.
Okay. So Tony, he bought a second PB1000 SVS subwoofer from SVS and let them know he's been listening to us. And Corey emailed me and said that he thinks our podcast is the best, and he's been slowly getting his friends and family into it, which is
Yay.
another way of supporting the podcast. Get
Mm-hmm.
somebody into it, let us know, let a manufacturer know, and you'll become listener of the week as well. So thank you, Tony. Thank you, Corey.
Thank you guys. We appreciate the support.
That's right. And Herb over at Cross Spectrum Labs wanted us to mention a couple of stuff. Now, Cross Spectrum Labs, we've been recommending for a very long time because they sell calibrated mics. So
Mm-hmm.
you buy a mic from them. What they do is they take that mic and they calibrate it versus a known mic, a professionally calibrated mic. And they know exactly how that thing measures stuff. And then they measure this. They take your mic, your specific mic, then they measure the same thing, and they calibrate it, meaning that they whatever the mic says that it's hearing, they know what it should actually be hearing. So they
Yeah.
calibrate. They give you a curve that corrects any inconsistencies with your mic. Now, where those inconsistencies come from, manufacturing differences. Okay, from one mic to another. So this makes sure that you have a professionally calibrated mic with this correction curve. They've been selling that for years. We highly recommend them because it gives you the best possible tool. He does not charge a huge premium on top of the price of the mic.
Not at all.
So
Yeah.
so it really makes a lot of sense to do it. One of the things we have been recommending lately is a mini DSP. That is something to calibrate your subwoofers or your speakers with. It's a newish box that does that. Well, Cross Spectrum Labs is now selling the mini DSP as well. There's a 2x4 units, so you can purchase them alongside your calibrated microphone and get it all from the same place all at once.
Right.
He did say that this is a new thing he's doing, so he's going to kind of test the waters and see how well they sell before he really pushes it out in earnest. But go on their website now. You can see that they are on there right now.
Yeah.
He is also helping to organize what's called a noise control conference, which is taking place in Providence, Rhode Island, and that's coming in this June. This will be mostly of interest to custom installers. So if you're a custom installer or know one, let them know about this. The Noise Control Conference in Rhode Island. If you'd like to make a presentation, or you can submit a paper and pay admission fee at a link, which we'll put on the show notes. It's noisecon16.inceusa.org.
Rolls off
So,
the tongue, but come to
somebody should have read
avrant.com.
that
We'll have
link.
the link.
We'll have the link there because somebody should have read that link because if you look at it real fast, it looks weird. Um, so once again, check that out for Herb over at Cross Spectrum Labs, and thank you for the donation, Herb.
Yes, very
Now,
much.
in news, Appearing Audio has a new Varus speakers on the way. These are Varus 2s.
Mhm.
They've re-engineered the tweeter, which was already excellent to begin with, and it's now a patented tweeter, which
Right.
means they also have a new crossover and higher power handling. And right now, all you can do is pre-order, right? Where they call it
Yeah, I
the
mean, right now
XDs.
they've got the tower package as something you can pre-order. You'll notice that before when you went to the Varus line, of course, the towers were listed there, and they are not listed as something you can purchase right now because the old ones are out of stock and the new ones haven't quite arrived yet. So, if you were thinking of purchasing a Pyrian, you'll probably want to call them on the phone because I am certain they're willing to take pre-orders or at least put you on a reserve list for the first shipment, so if you know that these things are coming, which they are. So it's a new tweeter design, still part of the Varus line, but these will be the Varus 2
Yeah,
now.
they look different. They got sort of a little
Yeah,
weird waveguide thing on them. It's
yeah.
sort of the thing that's not the same as my speakers. I don't think. I don't remember that. Anyways, so they call the Varus 2 Grand Tower XD. I guess the XD is the package. Is that what
I
the
think
XD
that's the
is?
package. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
So they're just going to be called the Varus 2s, I suppose.
yeah.
Also in the news, once I get back to my news, oh, that's it. No, you want to say something about
Oh,
Vizio?
I haven't really looked into it much, but I just heard that Vizio introduced a new series of televisions, the D series. No, they already had the E series, the M series, and the reference series. And so you would think, well, the D series, that letter comes before E, it must be lower end than that. And some of them kind of are. It's a very strange line. There's like some 1080p models, some 4K models, but they all have full array local dimming. It's all 16 zones, just like the E series. So honestly, I'm a little confused by the D series, but there is a new one out there, and the whole thing is they're the lowest priced one, so I guess that's why the letter is below. But it's weird because some of them straddle in between, like the D and M series. So okay, Vizio, back to being confusing. I mean, for years they had confusing model numbers, and then
Yes.
everything was pretty much sorted last year. It all made sense. Things like all ended with a C and all began with the letter of the series. But they're like, no, we're Vizio. We refuse to have non confusing model numbers. So they're back.
All right. Well, that's exciting for them, I suppose.
I will mention
Probably
they have a 70-inch TV for $1,300. So, get on it.
with what? With 16 zones? With just 16 zones and
Yeah, with
70
16
inches?
zones. That's right. But that's still
Okay.
very cheap for such a huge TV. So,
It is, but you
you
kind of
know,
get what you pay for there.
yeah,
This might be the
maybe.
Walmart specific
Yeah, yeah. Sounds about
line, is
right.
what this might be. So, uh, maybe we won't be recommending that one. We'll have to look into it, but maybe we won't be recommending that one. Don't run out and go buy it. We got some comments from some listeners.
Mhm.
Carl shared an article about high res audio rumored to be in development for Apple Music. This rumor has been floating around for a really long time, and
Mhm.
they're saying 9624, but only streaming. Maybe
Or only through Apple Music
well,
specifically.
definitely only through Apple Music, but yeah.
Well, why not iTunes downloads though? Like.
Oh, that's true, I suppose.
Uh,
Uh,
can we
I don't
just
know.
have CD quality, please? Can we just have that? Why
Well,
can't we have
let's
that?
let's well, hey, maybe if they start streaming this high quality stuff, then they'll give us CD quality in iTunes,
I
and
mean, they
I
have
can
Apple lossless, which
they
means
do.
the file size would be smaller than an actual full CD, but you could just leave it at 44.1 16-bit, and there you go. Done.
Nope.
Instead of, I mean, 256 generally sounds fine, but if you're a very critical listener, you can legitimately pick out the difference between 256 and full lossless CD quality. But why jump from there to 9624? And is it 9624 loss E or lossless? We don't know.
We don't know.
Yeah.
If it's streamed, I bet it's lossy.
The whole mention of, well, they've got Dr. Dre on board. I'm like, well, then I'm out
Yeah.
because guy's freaking deaf. Hey, man, this sounds
Know what
really
this
good.
needs?
Yeah, to you.
More bass. It needs more bass and less of all the other stuff. Because who cares what those people say? I don't want people to listen to my lyrics because I'm a misogynist. All right, Todd noticed that when we were discussing, and when by we mean Rob, was discussing balanced signals last week. Rob said that a balanced signal is 12 volts hotter than an unbalanced signal, when he probably meant that there was a 12 dB difference in signal level, which apparently was true.
Yep. Oh, yeah. That's absolutely true. I misspoke. I'm glad for the correction because we do aim to give out factual and correct information on the podcast. A simple me misspeaking. Yeah. If you look, I mentioned like on Focal's professional monitors, and this goes for lots of professional monitors, ones that allow you to switch between a balanced and an unbalanced signal on the input. They might have a switch on the back. You'll notice that one says +4 dBu. dBu is what's it called? Unloaded. Aha, there's the word. Unloaded, meaning it is basically it's not caring about what the impedance is. So you'll see +4 dBu for one and -10 dBV, which is dB volts. So Todd gave us a link to a little calculator if you want to convert between different decibel scales, like unloaded versus volts versus there's like little v, which is more or less the same thing as unloaded. So yeah, you can convert between things if you want to. And yes, it is a 12 decibel, 12 dBu difference, not a 12 volt difference, which is what I said. So thank you for the correction, Todd. We do aim to be correct.
Yes. Nathan loves his mini DSP, which we have been talking about quite a bit on this podcast recently, but he wanted to recommend a DS speaker. I guess that's the way I'm going to say that.
Yeah, DS speaker, like capital DSP, because it's digital signal processor. But then
Speaker.
SP are the first two letters of speaker, so they merged it all together.
I'm going with
That's
DS
the brand
speaker.
name. Yeah, DSP.
Anyways, it's called an anti-mode as a potentially better, more automated subwoofer equalization solution. While it costs more at about $270, it comes with a microphone. It does all the measurements and number crunching itself. You can measure from multiple locations and select from 3 additional EQ settings after the setup is done. Now, I actually had time to do some research on this little bad boy thing here. And by multiple, it means 2.
Okay.
And their recommendation, and it does come with a mic. I don't know how calibrated or whatever it is, but it does come with a mic, and it's a box. And depending on what buttons you press and hold down, and different things, and what lights light up, it'll kind of tell you what it's doing. It is automated, but it ends up being a black box. You have no idea what it's doing. And the 3 additional EQ settings are basically, they call them bass boosts.
Yeah.
But what they're really doing.
Low.
What's that?
They're really low frequencies.
Yeah, they're like 25 hertz.
It's
around
20, 25, or 30 hertz.
Right.
Which is unusual for that to be where you would be boosting the bass.
Well, they're thinking that what you want is more, it's the points where most people's subwoofers start rolling off, and they're trying to get some stuff out of it. But what they're really doing is, because they're worried about headroom and breaking your subwoofer, so they're not actually boosting it by 3 dB. They're actually cutting everything else around.
They're lowering everything else. Okay.
Yes. Yeah. So at least that's the way it said in the manual. So that gave me a little bit of cause. And if you look at all the boosting and stuff like that, like everything looks like absolute garbage except for the flat settings, which is fine. Okay. If the flat setting, but like all the rest of them are like these weird big humps everywhere. I don't know if it's just the scales they were using and stuff like that, but it just didn't look very good. But the flat line, I'm like, yeah, I'll take that flat line. Set me up with the flat line. So flat would be fine. It is very automated. Their recommendations are mostly pretty good in there. One of the things they do say is like, take it from the main seat, and if you notice that you have one seat in your theater that's really bad, you can take a second one there, and that'll help even everything out. I'm like, if you have a seat in the corner and it's bad, that seat's not going to get any better. All you're going to do is screw up the good stuff.
Screw up everywhere else.
Yeah. So I am not necessarily sure that some of their recommendations are all that perfect, but they're, who knows what it's doing in there. It's probably just a little parametric EQ like anything else. So it
mentions that it's do time domain measurements, so it
should have fur filter.
Should be a fur filter if they're. I mean, sometimes people say things that they don't do, but I'm that's not the case here. I believe them. There's no reason this couldn't be a fur filter system. So
there's lots of reasons. It costs a lot of money.
Yeah,
they don't want to.
I'd heard of the anti-modes before. I kind of forgot all about them. The thing was, we used to have several, right? Like SVS used to have an Odyssey-based separate box. Velodyne used to have their SMS1 separate box. Yeah. And those aren't really available anymore. So these separate automated, come with a microphone boxes. I mean, Paradigm still their perfect bass kit, and Martin Logan has a kit as well.
Yeah.
But you're not they're not as common, which is why I sort of started mentioning the mini DSP more because it exists and it's inexpensive. So,
And it's
but
a
yeah,
lot more
these anti modes are out
powerful than this thing is too.
there. Right, right,
So, but then again, all you have to do is press and hold some buttons on there. But
exactly. Yeah.
honestly, it's a little confusing the way they have this thing set up.
Hmm.
It's like, well, if this light is half lit, and then this, and then this, and this, and I'm like, what? Half lit? What? So it's a little weird. But if Nathan likes it, I'm sure it's fine. So yeah,
Yeah, I've
that's it.
certainly
If
seen it
anybody
mentioned
else
on the
has any,
forums.
yeah, if anybody else has got some feedback on the anti mode, just let us know. It does seem to indicate that it's not trying to boost; it's just trying to cut.
Right.
So that's good. That, as I said, they warn that if you're noticing it being quieter, it's because you're not hearing all those peaks that you were hearing before, and all that. Some of the like setup, like if you have a ported sub, then make sure you turn it to a reasonable volume. I'm like, well, what the hell's a reasonable volume? What does that mean? Reasonable volume?
I guess not shaking things like literally and
Ah,
creating noise that way.
I don't know. And they have like this weird thing, like, well, to make sure the mic works, you can tap it, and if you tap it, and the thing resets or whatever,
Uh-huh.
then or you see a light go on, like on the thing. That's what it is. If you see a light go on, that means that the mic's working. Then hit it harder, and
Yeah.
it'll reset the whole system, because if any sort of really loud noise will cancel out the calibration.
Clips it.
I'm
Yeah.
like, are you seriously suggesting people beat up on the mic that you're sending them? Because I feel like that's questionable, like, suggestions going
Yeah.
on there.
Hmm.
Anyways, I went and saw Star Wars. That's my news. I
Okay,
did
you
see
did.
Star Wars. We
All
will
right.
not talk about it on this podcast.
Not going to
We
spoil
will
it.
be talking about it afterwards because I
Okay.
want to talk about it. But I did see it.
All right. I had a conversation after you left our hangout party, which takes place after the show. Once we're finished the recording, we have a hangout party on Google Hangouts where you can come and chat with us and fellow listeners. So I chatted with it about with some people after you left, so we did not spoil it for you.
I
And it
was
was
getting worried. I'll be honest with you. I was getting worried. You guys were seeing were sounding a lot like you were going to start saying stuff. So
I know.
when I dropped out, I was not in any sort of, I didn't have any motivation to get back in. So yeah.
So before we jump into questions, which we will, I just wanted to mention we talked a little bit about Sean's big theater building project
Yes,
last
yes,
week,
yes.
and that we will be talking about. That's basically going to be the end of the podcast. Being that it's been a holiday weekend, we didn't have a huge number of new questions come in, which is convenient because it hopefully will allow us some time to tackle some of Sean's questions. I love that this is basically a build from scratch. We actually kind of have a second almost build from scratch, but they're only looking for some very specific recommendations in that second case.
Yeah.
So, yeah, Sean, you can look forward to the end of this podcast. We'll basically be talking all about you.
There we go. Infinite Gary. We only answered one of his many questions last week, and that
That's
was, what do we want for Christmas? I suggested I wanted an AC in here. I got a recommendation for what they call a ductless system. In
yes.
fact,
Yeah.
my parents actually have one. I use that in Australia. It's fine. I would
Hmm.
look into that, to be honest with you, but frankly, they're not as quiet as they say they are. They're not
Yeah.
loud, but they're not as quiet as they
The
say they
ones that
are.
seem to work well, it's a ductless system so that the compressor for the air conditioner is still outside,
Yes. Yes.
not just like metal pipes, like almost like small
Yeah.
plumbing pipes because it's liquid transfer. But then instead of feeding a direct wall unit, it feeds a unit in your ceiling that is like a big duct type thing
Hmm.
that blows low velocity but high volume air throughout the room, and those tend to be the quietest ones. So you got the combination of everything, like separating the compressor, no air actual transfer, and then large volume low velocity air. So
Yeah.
there's your solution.
Yeah, I am not even going to recommend that to my wife, so
Ah,
it's not going to happen. But
central
it's
air is still the
something.
easiest.
I have central air, but I would need a
Yeah.
second zone back here. Is what I
Ah.
would do. All right, Infinite Gary, Tom Vo. How do you say his last name?
Vodinal, I think. Vodinal?
Vodenal, whatever.
Vodhanal?
Tom
I don't.
V,
Yes.
whose last initial is the V in SVS, less SVS, and starred Power Sound Audio. This is a
Yeah.
statement of fact.
It
We
is.
don't mention them very often. That's not necessarily true, but yes, it is. How come? How do they stack up against SVS today? Well, if you go to their website, they will show you how they think they stack up against SVS today,
Hmm.
and because they compare their subs to everybody else, and they have a little measurement at the bottom that tells you how many of everybody else's subs it would take to equal the sub that you're looking at.
That's right.
And of course, they pick whatever subs they want from the other company,
Well, I
but
mean, they're fairly. I mean, they're
they are
mostly ones that
fairly
are comparable in
comparable.
price. Mostly ones
Yeah.
that are comparable in price.
Not
So that's fair.
necessarily, but
Well,
yes,
fairly
the
close.
same price or more.
Yeah.
They don't generally choose from that.
Right.
And
And
I've
they're looking
got
at sheer output, according to
yes,
like CEA 2010 type specs, the
right.
burst tests of how loud you can be for a moment at any given frequency. So, right.
I their subwoofer start off at a grand, uh,
Mm-hmm.
and that in itself, Gary, is why I'm not as recommending them as often to people simply because so SVS starts off quite a bit cheaper than that.
500. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a lot cheaper than that. So
It's
when people
half.
are looking for recommendations for subwoofers and they have a small room, which most people do, they do not need a PSA uh, subwoofer. They just don't. And therefore, why would I recommend them? Now, when we get into whenever you hear us talk about higher output and larger rooms, we start saying the name Rhythmic. We start saying
Yep.
the name SVS. We start saying HSU a lot more because they have those subs that are so much bigger and have so much more output than the SVS ones do. But the SVS ones, they have those same characteristics. They're just a lot more expensive because, frankly, they look a lot better and they're a lot smaller, generally speaking.
You use
Like,
a smaller driver and a smaller cabinet, but getting similar output, which means crazy high powerful amplifiers and woofers that can move a tremendous amount, like
that's right.
3 inches in
Like
and out.
we heard from Gary Akubian the other day, it's about that driver amp combo.
Right.
And yes, you can take a big massive driver or two big massive drivers and put them in a box with a big massive amp, and yes, you'll get a lot of bass. And I'm sure the Power Sound Audio guys are doing their research and everything else, but their boxes are just, I mean, one of their subs is 100 and is it 96 or 86 pounds. It's got two 18-inch
Is that
drivers
the
in it.
yeah the big double 18er?
Yeah,
Yeah.
the double 18er. It's ridiculous. Now,
But
I'm
if
not
that's
saying,
what you need,
yeah,
if that's what you need, then they've got it. That's the
they've
thing.
got it, and I've got no problems with that. Now, they have quite a few subs on there that are all, but they're just sort of plain Jane, truck bed liner
Mhm.
type things, and a lot of people are looking for something a little bit more than that. True bass heads don't care what their subs look like. True bass heads don't care how big they are. True bass heads are simply looking for extension, and you can get a sub that I think is like 1099 and that they rate down to 14 hertz on their website there. So I mean, it's huge. It's over like 100 pounds, but they've got it. So if
Yeah,
that's what people are looking for, but
the
generally
vented
speaking,
dual 18 is 196 pounds, and they recommend you connect it to a 30 amp outlet.
yeah, that's
So
convenient because that's what everybody has in their home theater.
that's your dryer
Yeah,
or your electric range.
right. So that's why. And how do
But
they stack up? They
yeah,
stack up just fine. They
yeah. I
stack
mean
up just fine.
that for $2,000, that's a pretty good deal.
Yeah.
So, yeah. I mean, the thing, their smallest subs are 15-inch drivers. That's where they start. They have 15s and 18s, and then dual 18s and a triple 18 and stuff like that. So they are going for big, extremely high output, not fancy looking, but good value subwoofers. So
And
they are
frankly,
hitting a particular niche.
that is exactly what SVS was
Yeah,
when Tom V was there.
that's right.
Okay. And there's nothing wrong with that. And we loved them back then, but they were always, always, always a hard sell. They really were. Their cylinders were their big selling point because they had a small footprint. Yes, they
Right.
looked weird, but they had a small footprint. But that's sort of why I have always had a sort of particular love for the cylinders, is because the old SVS days, they sold these subs that had like two downward firing 18-inch drivers and three ports, and it was as big as a coffee table if you stack two coffee tables on top of each other. It was 250 pounds.
Yeah.
Those plus 12s or whatever they were called, right?
Yeah.
Those
Yeah.
ridiculously
The
large ones.
plus
And
slash twos and the
yeah,
whatnot.
it's and frankly, I like the direction that the current SVS is, which is we are going to give you something that you can actually put in your house and people uh, that you as a podcast can recommend to people, and they're not going to say you made me buy this massive thing and now my wife won't speak to me anymore, and we've been sitting on it because that was either that or no couch. You know, there's either a couch or a sup. So that's why
But
you don't hear about it.
what
But
is interesting is Power Sound Audio. They've just introduced two new models, one sealed and one ported, both under $1,000. So now the cheapest is $99. That's
999.
the sealed ones,
Those are
and
15.
it's
Those
still
still, right?
15-inch drivers. But these are, as far as I know, the first downward firing ones. They look very similar to some of HSU's older designs, and I don't think it's any coincidence because HSU not that long ago dropped all their prices on their 15-inch models and kind of started eating Power Sound in that they came in with extremely high output 15-inch subwoofers that undercut what Power Sound Audio was offering. So now they've basically matched them because if you include shipping, they're more or less equivalent, or maybe Power Sound's a couple of dollars cheaper after you factor in shipping. So they know where their competition lies, and they're
Yeah.
taking the steps to compete head to head with somebody else who might be undercutting them at any given moment. So yeah, I got no problem with them. The one little annoyance I have is similar to the old SVS days. You often go there and stuff is out of stock, or they're constantly introducing new models, which is like, I don't know. I mean, there's nothing necessarily wrong with that, but I always kind of wonder, like, well, how does that make the person feel who just bought one that just got replaced in the lineup?
Right.
Or they waited 3 months because it was out of stock, and then when they finally got it, it got replaced by a new model.
Right.
That always makes me a little bit wary as a customer because it's like, well, I kind of want to have whatever's best.
I don't think that PSA has any. I'm not worried about them pulling a AV123
No,
and
it's nothing like
falling off
that.
the
No.
face of the map or anything like that, or Elemental Designs, because Elemental Designs was also like that. They were
Yeah.
introducing new models on a weekly basis, and I think they were all just like mock-ups. Are like, yeah, you want to buy this one? Sure, we'll make it for you. And yeah, it ships in 3 weeks. Why? Because it takes us
The
that long to
walls are
make.
6 inches thick of MDF. Isn't that what
Yeah.
you want?
Yeah. So, yeah. All right, let's go on. What does the phrase "a sense of black between notes" mean when it's used to describe speakers? It means that somebody is being too flowery with their language and should just go back and write the poetry they always wanted to write.
Mm,
But in actuality, what it means is that the speaker there's no holdover of the notes. At least that's to me as a reviewer, that's
yeah.
what I would be saying. I'm saying that between this note and that note, it wasn't like there was a little bit of a ringing that continued through the
Mm-hmm.
room. Now, frankly, it has more to do with your room than the speaker, but don't tell the reviewer that or the reader of it because they're like, oh, it must be the speaker if it's
It it can be the fault of the speaker though, because I mean
it can.
there is
I'm
this
not
thing
saying
called inertia. Once
yes.
something is moving and the speaker is physically moving, objects in motion want to remain in motion, and speaker drivers are no different. So this has to do with transient response, and it has to do with being able to delineate between two separate notes. So sometimes this has to do with the impulse response as well. You have a very short little burst of a sound, and the signal is saying play for an extremely short amount of time and then go back to silent. And no speaker driver can do that completely perfectly because of inertia, but some will stop faster than others, or they will drop by 10 or 60 decibels. You usually have these LD10, LD60 type of numbers, faster than other drivers. So that's what they're talking about. The sense of black between notes is that there is a separation between two notes that should be separated. They are better delineated, hopefully because of faster transient response in the speaker.
It's the room. So, in most 99% of the cases, it's
A
the room.
lot of times it is,
It's
yeah, very much so.
they're hearing their room. So that's just that. Next, Gary from the webpage that describes how to break the audible frequency into audible frequency spectrum into 7 bands. Now, this is where they defined it. Sub
Right.
bass is 20 hertz to 60 hertz. Bass is 60 to 250. Low mid range is 250 to 500. Mid range is 5 to 2000. Upper mid range is 2 to 4,000. And presence is 4 to 6,000. And brilliance is 6 to 20,000.
Those are the words they use. Wrote down what they wrote.
Okay. First of
I
all, I
didn't
got a
make it up.
problem with calling 20 to 60 hertz sub bass because it ain't. Sub bass is 20 and down. That's subsonic. It's what sub
Subsonic
is
bass.
supposed to mean. Subsonic bass is lower than 20 hertz. That's what you cannot hear, you can only feel. So
Right.
right there, they lost me. And then when they start saying words like brilliance and presence, and especially considering that we have such a thing as presence speaker and Atmos speakers
Right.
and all
Yeah.
this
Yeah.
stuff, using words like presence is just outright confusing. And it doesn't make any sense in this. I mean, where's the anyways? So Gary wants to know where the human voice falls within all this.
It would fall, according to what they've defined, more or less from the bass to the upper mid range,
Yeah.
going by the names that we just laid out. I mean, the lowest fundamental in a bass male voice is about 85 hertz, roughly. That's about as low as a voice will go. And then the consonant sounds in your clicks and ticks are up in the 4 kilohertz range. So generally, we say most of the human voice falls between about 200 to 2000 hertz. That's, more or less the mid range. That's where the majority of the human voice lies, but it can go above and below that. So that's more or less where that's falling.
So he also wants to know the webpage describes how boosting or cutting these 7 audio bands will affect the sound more using more subjective terms like fat versus thin, warmth, clarity, tinny, boomy, sparkle, air, sparkle.
It
Seriously?
was one of the words they said.
Lots of speaker reviewers only describe the sound of these subjective terms. How good is this webpage for decoding what they really mean? Zero good. That's exactly how
Really?
good it is. I think it's zero good. They're not taught. They're not looking at these things. The sparkle. If they say sparkle, first of all, stop reading the review. If they
I
say sparkle or danceable about cables in particular, this is an issue. I don't think that this is good. No, no. Believe me, there is no. Hey, we do not. They do not pass you out a handbook, Gary, when you start reviewing
well,
speakers
that's
and
very
say,
true. Yeah.
we just use these terms because they mean something to us as a reviewer, and we're hoping that through our descriptions around those words, you can infer what we mean.
Yeah.
We are not talking to each other and saying, well, when you say boomy, what do you mean? I've never
Mm.
had that conversation with another reviewer. When you say tinny, what do you mean? Well, tinny sounds like tinny. What was tinny sound like? Well, read the words around when I use the word tinny, because I'm going to say I was listening to this song and this thing happened and it sounded and it sounded tinny to me. Then you can go,
Right.
okay, let me hear this song or let me think about what he's saying. Now I'm understanding. There is no glossary for audio terms. It's
Yeah.
all,
Yeah.
especially subjective audio terms, Gary. You're never going to find that. You're never going to be able to lock this down. You're not going to be able to go through each review and do like a meta analysis and say, okay, well, on this review it's a 10 and this one is that, and then we can put it into a database and then analyze it with a SPSS or something like that and come up with like a factor analysis, and therefore we can objectively say from these subjective reviews, because our terminology is completely unique to each one of us.
Mm.
We're not using the same terminology. So no, it is of zero use. And if Rob wants to disagree with me, he's welcome to,
No,
but
I
he's
mean
wrong.
the reason I made kind of an S sound is because when they break down these 7 different ranges of frequencies and then they give a description, and they use some of these words that we just mentioned, this warmth and tinny and stuff like that, and where they described those sounds, what frequency range they feel those types of words fall into, I don't tremendously disagree. Like if somebody used that word within that frequency range, I would go, yeah, that's reasonable. Like I don't think they're way off in what words they put in those particular frequency
Yeah.
ranges. However, I 100% agree that this is absolutely not a guide that you can use for any other reviewer, because like you just said, those reviewers are not using a glossary that says, well, this word means this frequency range. Someone might say warm, this speaker sounds warm, or this amplifier sounds warm, and it will not fall into the lower mid-range or bass that was described in this article. It was because there's a mid-range suck out in that particular speaker, and that's why they thought it sounded warm. It had nothing
Right.
to do with
And a
something
lot
else.
of
So
times,
yeah, it could
tinny
be almost
means
anything.
a tweeter is breaking up.
There's
Okay.
that. Yeah.
Tinny does not mean that there's a boost in this frequency range. It's
Mm,
that it's trying to do this thing, and the speaker, the driver itself is deforming, and therefore the sound sounds flat. It
mm.
sounds in some way not realistic. And that comes across as tinny to me when I'm listening to it. So yeah, it's just fine for what they're saying, and they can write anything they want. It you just can't you can't have that transferred to anybody's review
Yeah.
at all,
Yeah,
ever,
that's fair.
ever. All right, Andrew over on Facebook. He's his theater is in his basement, which is great, but the stairway is completely open to the rest of the house. He says that if AV Rent had been around when he built the house, he would have installed the door. Andrew, you can still install a door.
It can be done.
It's not impossible. It's definitely a thing that can happen. All you have to do is get somebody in your house to agree to do it, and then you pay somebody else to do it, because somebody can come in there and hang a door in like an hour, or you can do it in a weekend and then pay somebody to come in and do it in an hour after they rip to tear out all your work and do it. Because hanging the door is not as easy as it looks. It really, really super isn't. So, yeah, you can still do that, but maybe there's some reason you can't. But I think you can. So, and Andrew, to your next question, which is he needs more base because he's trying to pressurize the entire house.
Pretty much.
The cheapest answer is install a door.
That's yeah, that actually is kind of true.
I mean, you could spend a lot on subwoofers, or you could spend a couple $100 on a door. And I mean, that's like being generous. I think a couple $100 that's all the molding, that's the paint, that's to have the person come over and do it. I really think that you probably have a friend who'll do it for free. It's like $70 for all the rest of the stuff. That's if you don't have the paint. Andrew, we will gladly give you some suggestions for subwoofers. But honestly, dude, install a door. Install a door. That's the answer. The answer is a door.
I can't largely disagree with that. That is, I mean, the problem is if you got enough subwoofer output to actually feel your theater pressurize, you have essentially pressurized the whole house. So everybody is hearing that bass really loud.
That includes the kitchen.
Yeah.
Okay. People walking in the front door, you're like, every time they open the front door, you're like, close the door. Like, I'm getting the bass suck out down here. Like, your neighbor's like, yeah, I just install a door. I think that's really the answer.
However,
sorry, let's go on. He has a Velodyne FR 1500. I didn't look that up. And a Paradigm.
It is a 15-inch.
One would think. And a Paradigm PDR 10. Ugh. So they're not getting the job done. He's got a budget, though, and the SVS Plus models already exceed it, let alone the Ultra model. So he's leaning towards an HSU, a VTF-15H Mark II. Do we have any other suggestions? Well, there's Power Sound Audio.
There is, yeah.
We just talked about them. There's also Rhythmic, who has options there. So
now that HSU, that VTF-15H Mark II, remains the least expensive option for that amount of output.
Right.
The new Power Sound Audio models are actually, surprisingly, a little bit physically smaller. The new 15V that they just introduced,
Right.
which is under $1,000. But it's basically, once you factor in shipping, basically the same price, and it doesn't play any louder than the HSU does. So it's an alternative to the HSU because it's not really costing more, and it's about the same output, and it's actually physically a little bit smaller, which might be helpful in some way. But yeah, that VTF-15H Mark II essentially is not being beat by anyone else in terms of output for the dollar.
Yeah. But that said, I have no faith that's going to be able to pressurize your whole house.
I mean, it'll do more than that Paradigm PDR-10, I guarantee that. The Velodyne 1500, although I think that's sealed. Is that sealed?
I don't
recall.
I told you I didn't look it up.
It's definitely an older model, though. I mean, it didn't have the same amplifier power, so I'm betting that HSU still plays louder than that. But yeah, I mean, it'll be louder. It will be louder.
I'm not saying you shouldn't upgrade your subs, okay?
Yeah.
But give us look at your diameter or the cubic, footage of your home theater, and that with a door, and then you could actually buy two nicer, smaller, cheaper subs to replace the two subs that you have right now, from someplace like from SVS, and maybe really increase the feeling of bass in that room, and come out on top. Overall, for bass, you're always going to come up on. I think there's no way you're going to be able to pressurize your whole house and still live in it.
Yeah, it could be unpleasant.
So that said, I think you get a door, and then you come back to us and tell us how much space you've got, and then we'll get you some subs that are smaller, cheaper, and we'll really blow your mind in that room. Now, Dev, he's been a happy user of the, I'm not saying it,
SCHIIT.
yes, SCHIT audio, Madi and Magni. Madi and Magni. Jeez,
Mm-hmm.
I hate this company.
Modi and Magni, those are their least
Headphone,
expensive headphone DAC and amplifier.
okay, as well as an Emotiva DC1.
Okay.
He bought a Woo Audio WA2 tube headphone amp. He
Uh-huh.
tried plugging into several different headphones. Regardless of the headphones, he can only trump the volume dial not even halfway before he begins to hear an audible hum.
Mm.
And the hum only gets louder as he turns the volume dial up further. He's tried plugging it into different outlets, even went to a friend's house and plugged it in there. He's tried having no source plugged in, different sources plugged in, and the hum always persists. People at HeadFi, that was an eye roll. What's what that was?
Yeah.
Think that it's a ground loop.
It's
People
not.
at HeadFi have absolutely no damn clue what they're talking about. Let's just start with that.
Given the description, it's
It is
not.
not a ground loop. A ground loop does not care what volume you're at. Okay,
That's right.
you will hear it
You
right
would
away.
never, you would, no matter how low down you turn the volume, it would never go away. So
would
the
never
fact
go
that you
away.
have to turn it up almost halfway before the hum shows up, it's not a ground loop.
Ground loop. And he needs a ground loop isolator, so don't listen to that. Customer service at Woo Audio says he needs to upgrade his cables and his DAC.
Yeah, of course they do.
The first thing you need to do is anybody that would tell you that advice, that does not deserve your money. So you need to send that crap back and get yourself your money back. But let's pretend that that's not the case.
Yeah.
Can we think of anything to get rid of the hum? No, because it's coming from your device, man. I don't see any. It's noise floor, and it's from those tubes, as far as I'm concerned.
It's heat.
I mean, or something within there is doing it. It's noise floor. You're experiencing a very high noise floor. So,
I mean, the only other thing it could be is a severe impedance mismatch
right
between his
the
headphones and that can happen potentially. There should be a rating on that headphone amp as to what impedances it will work with, because some tube headphone amps only work with really high impedance headphones,
Yeah.
like just 300 to 600 ohm headphones. That's the only thing they're designed for. I'm not familiar enough with this particular Woo Audio one. I mean, I've heard of it. I know I've seen it highly recommended by people who are sending vinyl through it, so they're not going to notice the hum because they're listening to loud hiss anyway.
Yeah, the hiss covers the hum.
I mean, okay, if you're really into headphones, I get it. You're trying out different stuff. Part of the fun of it is you're reading the reviews, you're seeing this stuff, and you're like, okay, I want to see what this sounds like because so and so is raving about it. But you have tried this firsthand. Either you have a defective unit, because a little later on he says, well, you know, he had the tubes that came with the thing, and one of them was clearly producing a hiss. He replaced that tube, and the hiss went away. So he had essentially a defective tube was shipped to him first. Either you have a defective unit, which is absolutely possible,
Yeah.
or this was only designed to work with really high impedance headphones and none of yours are, or you're just hearing the byproduct of there being a lot of heat in those tubes, in which case you have now done the experiment of, I listened to the thing lots of people told me sounded good, it sounds like crap because it hums, and therefore I will send it back and I don't need to consider a tube amplifier anymore.
Or at least that tube
headphones.
amplifier. Yeah. At least that tube amplifier. Yes, I agree.
Yeah. Just because other people on like HeadFi are telling you it's good doesn't mean it's good.
I understand how human psychology works. People look for validation anywhere they can, and a lot of people look for validation in getting other people to buy the thing that they've bought, and they are looking for somebody else to say, yes, I too like this thing.
Right.
Yes, I too validate your expenditure of the money. And I have no idea how much this thing cost, but I'm sure it wasn't cheap.
No, I mean, here's the other thing. You've been using like the Emotiva DC1. We're familiar with that unit. It's not super expensive. It sounds really good. And you yourself have said you were really happy using it. So it's kind of like, well, what are we hoping to do by, I mean, you know, if you spent more money, you're hoping that it will sound even better. But sometimes it turns out it's kind of a lot of hogwash. That occasionally is what happens. So, I mean, like, you know, like the folks who are spending $30,000 on a turntable, I'm like, Hey, they believe it sounds better. I do not.
I believe it's a piece of art. A thirty thousand
Sure.
dollar turntable is a piece of art, and I would love to have one. I would. I'd sit it right over there. I wouldn't even put it in the home theater. I put it out in the living room. They're like, "What's that? A turntable? Oh, is it what's it hooked up to?"
Okay, dude, it's
Nothing.
$1,200. It's
Oh,
a twelve hundred
yeah. I
dollar
told you it was cheap.
headphone
I
tuner.
told you it was. I told you it was expensive. Yeah, yeah. It's
So
first
that's
of all
why.
not a ground loop. Second of all, has nothing to do with your DAC or your cables. All right.
No.
The two things it can be, or three things. It's defective. It's just part of the thing because of the heat and everything else, or it's a mismatch with your.
Oh, power cords is not included.
Of course, it is. Maybe
Yeah.
it's your power cord then. Clearly,
Dev, send it back if you
send
can,
it
please
back.
send. Or you know what? You can probably sell it for a
Sell
profit.
it. Yeah,
You probably can.
you just link up
I
all the good reviews that you
I would
read.
never recommend this thing just on the face of it. It's
Yeah,
it's a silly piece of gear.
yeah. All right. Tim has gotten advice from us before about updating his '90s home theater. Now he's helping his friend Rami plan Rami. I'm going with Rami. Plan his basement theater build. Rami's room is 16 and a half by 28 by 9, but he will have a tray ceiling around the perimeter that will be 18 inches lower, plus 12 by 12 bar area in the back of the room. That means that there's 4.5 inches, no, 4.5 feet to the side of the bar that you can walk past, I guess.
Yeah. Now it's interesting. I mean, it was funny because I was reading this. I'm like, tray ceiling. It's a soffit. That's what's.
Yeah,
It's a
that's what he
soffit
means.
around
Yeah,
his room. Yeah.
yeah.
It was. I was a little confused by that, but I saw the pictures, which are always very helpful. This room is at studs, so there is
Yes.
no drywall. There's nothing to deal with. He can wire this up, do whatever he wants as far as installation goes at this point.
Yes. Gear budget is around 10 grand for receiver,
Right.
speakers, projector, and screen. With the volume of the space being about 6,000 cubic feet, which pairs of sub are up to the job. So, according to Audioholics room ratings, that's an extreme room.
Mm-hmm.
So, we're back down to looking at some of these more higher output subs. That
Yep.
includes the HSU we just mentioned, the 15 Mark.
Yeah. VTF 15H. A pair of those would work super well in this
Yeah,
room. Could totally pressurize that
that's
space. No
that's your
problem.
least expensive option. Of course, you've now got the V15 from Power Sound
Yep.
Audio, which will also work. That's a fairly inexpensive option
Yeah, both of
as well.
those you're looking at
Those
about 2 grand
for the two of
after you
them. Yeah.
after you include shipping, and you're really not going to get any cheaper than that.
Yeah.
SVS does have. I would be suggesting their Plus series models,
Yeah.
but a pair of those is going to be more than 2 grand.
Yeah.
Rhythmic, you might be looking at their FV15 high power would be overkill, even a pair of those, but it would be more expensive too. So yeah, honestly, to me, it'd be between the HSU and the Power Sound Audios that we've conveniently just been talking about, but they are very much appropriate for that room size. So about 2 grand you're looking at there.
All right. In-wall and in-ceiling speakers are the only option Rami will consider.
Ah,
Number of speakers is undecided, but at least 7.2. Recommendations. I recommend you don't get 7.2. Let me start with that.
why
You have a
not?
you have a bar at the back of the room,
Yeah,
and that means you're going to be putting two speakers in the wall next to the bar.
and it is 12 feet. That bar is 12 feet deep. So yeah,
Yeah,
those surround back speakers would be quite far back.
and that means they'd be quite loud in order to be level matched to
Mm,
everything else, which means people at the bar back there, if you're going to have people sitting back there while movie or content is playing,
yeah.
and you calibrate it for that seat, which the seats I'm guessing are going to be quite near the dead center of that room.
Hmm.
First of all, he sent us pictures of the studs and the ceiling and stuff, but we did not get a top down diagram of how
Right.
this room looks, which is what we really need. So at this point, those pictures are all very good, but we need a top down, like draw it on a piece on a napkin,
But
take
I
a
mean,
picture of it.
essentially, the theater area is going to be 16 by 16.
Right.
That's more or less what we're looking at. We're going to have a 16 by 16 theater area. Behind that is a 12 by 12 bar. And then there's, sort of a 4 foot by 12 foot walkway area. Or maybe he's going to put a poker table in there or something like that.
Something.
So,
But the
yeah,
point here
it's
being is
basically.
that I would not put surround backs in there unless you're going to put them
Mm,
in the ceiling, and I don't ever recommend putting them in the ceiling.
but
Uh,
kind of everything might end up in the ceiling as we get to some of these future
right.
things he's talking about.
Yeah. So
Yeah,
So he
placement of the
says
surrounds, he
the placement of
says.
surrounds is limited by the basement door on one side, and we have no idea where that is, and the bar area on the other. But that's not true because you're not gonna be sitting flush with the bar.
Yeah,
You're
the
gonna be
bar
sitting,
should be behind you.
the bar is gonna be behind you, and you're gonna
Yeah.
be sitting up from that. So if you've got the 16-foot, there's probably gonna be at least 3 feet between the back of the couch and the beginning of the bar. You gotta have seats there,
Yeah.
right? I mean, it's not gonna be a stand-up bar. I'm sure there's gonna be seats there. So you're looking at a couple of feet there, which means I don't know where the door is. So you can put in wall speakers, I would think, in there. Now, is
Yeah,
that going to
probably.
put one very close to where people are sitting at that bar? Yeah, it is. But that is the only real option, I think. So I don't know where this door is, but you can put one above the door. Usually, I mean, the door's not going to be. I mean, how tall was this room? I thought he said 8 feet,
Nine
right?
feet. Well, it's 9 feet, but with a
18.
soffit going all the way
So
around it.
7.5 feet
Yeah.
down. You still have room to put one above there. Not a big
I
one.
will I will warn Tom ahead of time. He's going to be so angry when he hears one of my recommendations for what's coming
I,
up. But
I'm already angry at you just in general. Uh, so I can't answer this question unless I see a diagram, but sure you can do in ceilings, I suppose. You can do in ceilings for the surround backs as well.
mm-hmm.
Really, really wanted them, but I would say not to do that, and instead having 5.2.4
4, yeah, you could do that.
overheads because if you're down to studs, immersive audio is the way to go. You
Yeah,
might
because
as
then you
well.
could have top fronts and top rears,
And
and those top rears are totally doing the job of anything a surround back speaker would do in immersive audio.
yeah,
So yeah, that's definitely a possibility is to
so
go.
that's the way I would kind of
Yeah,
go with it. And where you put those speakers up front and on the walls, until I see the diagram, I can't recommend anything else. Am I going on, or are you going to say something?
yeah. Well, because this is still dealing with speakers, so the screen position thing
Okay,
affects
on the
speaker
screen wall
choice
there
too.
will be a fireplace as well with a hearth that is about 1 foot from the floor, which leaves about 6.5. I'm sorry, wait.
Right. So
A
he's got the
hearth, which is
soffit.
what? Yeah.
Yeah. So he's got a hearth on the bottom. That's a foot from the floor. So floor up
Okay.
to the hearth is a foot. Then there's 6.5 feet before you hit the bottom of the soffit because the soffit's only 7.5 feet from the floor.
Right. Right.
So he's got 6.5 feet to work with between the bottom of the soffit and the top of the hearth.
Why does there have to be a fireplace in this thing? Anyways, okay. So a 120-inch motorized screen is being considered, which
Mm-hmm.
is just less than this vertically without accounting for the black around the edges that motorized screens typically have. Not just
Now,
motorized screens, all screens
well,
typically have.
I think he's talking about the drop.
Yeah.
The extra black drop. Now, I worked this out. So a 120-inch motorized screen is just shy of 5 feet tall. It's 58 inches tall.
There you go. Got
So
plenty
it's
of
just shy
space.
of 5 feet tall. Most motorized screens have a 2 or 2.5 inch border around them. So add another 5 inches, you're looking at 5'3". Then usually the case, there are some slimmer ones, but usually you're looking at about 6.5 inches there or so.
Yeah. I'm
So
looking
this
at
should
mine.
fit.
Yeah, it should fit.
I think there might have been a slight miscalculation thinking that a 120-inch screen is taller than it is because it's just shy of 5 feet, the actual screen
Well, a lot of
itself.
times what they have is they have a lot of extra border at the top of the
Yeah,
screen.
that extra black
And that
drop.
allows
Yeah,
you to drop it down lower, but you can set that so as soon as it gets out of there,
that's right. Yeah,
and just give it a little bit of black above it so that you can project onto it and have a little
yeah,
bit of an over projection. You can set that to stop right there. So just
yeah.
because it says it extends down 6.5 feet, well, there might be 4 extra inches at the top of that thing,
Hmm.
6 extra inches at the top, a foot extra at the top of that
Yeah,
thing
yeah.
to
Something that
give
give you
it.
10 to 12 inches of extra black drop.
So you have that option, all right. So I'm not. I agree with Rob there. So if the screen is mounted inside the tray, so it would be inside. It would actually be dropping from inside that
Yeah, like
18
an
inches.
in-ceiling screen,
Yeah.
which they do have. Yeah,
So how far out does that hearth go? Whatever's going to be above the fireplace. That's a big question.
right.
Would it be better to mount the screen? Would it be better to mount the screen onto the face of the tray? Let's put the screen 3 feet in front of the main speakers. Would this be a problem? Uh,
Because I mean, he's thinking in-wall front speakers, obviously. Now, I don't know exactly where this fireplace is. Is this fireplace centered on that front wall? Because if so, where? I mean, he's asking where should they put the center speaker, and
Well,
he's
I don't
wondering if they should
know.
actually put the center speaker like in the soffit, essentially an in ceiling center speaker.
I mean, in the pictures there is. I'm looking at the bar.
Yeah,
I'm looking at where he's saying there's going to be a uh uh fireplace. I'm not seeing a fireplace. Well, maybe this is it right here, but that it's very confusing. But that's inset, so I don't know.
I mean, I'm thinking
It looks like
there's.
it's centered on the wall, though.
It
I think
looks
it.
like it's centered, yeah.
Yeah.
So the question becomes how tall is this fireplace, and are you planning to put an in wall center speaker above the fireplace? I'm assuming that fireplace is going to have a mantle. So an in wall center speaker that would be recessed from that mantle is a bad idea, acoustics wise.
Yeah.
This becomes a real challenge. I mean, could you have a mantle and simply have a regular center speaker on top of it with an acoustically transparent screen
You're
that
gonna
drops
have
down
to
in
have an
front of it?
acoustically transparent screen. I have a
Yeah.
feeling he's thinking he's gonna mount that speaker either in the ceiling or on that soffit.
Yes.
And which is neither one of those is really acceptable in my view, because
So,
now your voices are coming from the ceiling. I would rather you just skip the center channel altogether if that's your option, and
right.
just have
A
two
phantom center.
a phantom center. Just have your two main speakers. Then you're gonna
So,
have 4.2.4.
right. So, I mean, I've been taking all of this into account, and there is a compromise solution to this. There are two companies that I personally vouch for and like when it comes to in ceiling speakers, and those are Kef and Golden Ear.
Yes,
I think
discuss
both of
them.
them make good in ceiling speakers. Basically, their versions of in wall speakers are just their in ceiling speakers that happen to come with a rectangular face instead of a round face, but they basically don't change anything else about them. Um, Both of them offer speakers that are specifically meant to be used as your front, left, center, right speakers, but be installed in the ceiling, and they simply angle them so that they kind of sound like they're coming in front of you instead of above
I
you.
used to say about tweeters that you could angle in.
Yeah,
uh
independently. I don't like
yeah,
independently angleable
whatever.
tweeters from the
Just
mid range, but when the entire speaker
nitpicking.
is angled, that's not as bad. So Kef's version are kind of cool because they're actually motorized, so they actually sit flush in the ceiling, and then they motorized angle themselves down when it's time to play. That's Kef's version. They're a bit more expensive than Golden Ears. Golden Ear have their HTR 7000s, which are $500 each. But they are an in ceiling design, so they go upward, and look like they're facing straight down as far as what the grill looks like. But inside, they are angled and meant to be used as front, left, center, right. They would also be an acceptable choice for your surround speakers if you are determined to have your surround speakers in the ceiling, because again, they sound closer to the speaker being forward facing instead of directly above you, like a
I have
traditional
less.
down
Well,
facing
yeah,
ceiling
I
speaker.
don't see any reason to have surround back speakers in the ceiling when you can have immersive
But I
audio.
was thinking the side surrounds. If they're
Oh, side
determined to have
surrounds.
those
Yeah,
side surrounds in the ceiling, right? Now the thing is, we just got done saying maybe a 5.2.4 system, Atmos system, but now you're going to have all 9 speakers essentially in the ceiling or in the soffit. You're using different speakers for different tasks. You'd be using the angled type speakers for the left, center, right, and the surrounds, and then you'd be using traditional circular, straight downward firing ones for the Atmos speakers, the top fronts and the top rears. So that's doable. It's even affordable within this price range if you go with the golden ear option. Um, I'm not hugely against that, like not as much as I would be before such speakers existed. It's not my ideal, but I can appreciate wanting to maintain an aesthetic. You've already planned this fireplace. It's kind of put a hamper on things. It's
not kinda. It's not a hamper. It's a damper. But anyways,
yes,
it's a wet blanket on your plans.
but this
And it's
is
also
one
going to make things.
compromise way around it.
It's also going to make things pretty expensive, no matter how you look at it,
Yeah, but it's
because
within the budget.
it
It
is. But I mean, if
yeah.
you go with an acoustically transparent screen, that seriously, especially a motorized tension screen,
Yeah. Well,
That's going to be a major portion of your budget right there.
Elite Screens has an acoustically transparent 120-inch motorized tensioned screen for $1,100 on Amazon right now.
That's pretty much the only one that you can go with because
It really is.
that's the one because
That is
everyone
the
else is
one.
going to be thousands of dollars more expensive
Yes.
than that.
Yeah.
And just realize that you're buying the absolute cheapest option out there, and
But it's not a bad screen at all.
I don't think it is either. I'm
It's
just
a darn good
saying,
screen.
just saying.
I mean, we're coming up with solutions for the problem we've been given, and I have no problem with that because that honestly, the results are not going to be bad. If I were planning this theater from scratch, I probably wouldn't put the fireplace there because that frees us up. But look, these plans are already
I
set,
also would
and
have put the bar there, to be honest with you.
this is a way to contend with the situation and
Yeah.
get pretty decent results, honestly. I mean, the thing is, if that center speaker is going to end up in the soffit or in the ceiling, then one of these angled versions, either from Kef or from Golden Ear, is definitely the way I would go. And if you're going to do that, I would match the front left and right speakers to it because you don't want this crazy mismatch of sound. If all of them are the same speaker, all of them are installed in the same way, at least you get some consistency across your front soundstage. It might not be ideal for listening to two-channel music, but as far as movies go, it'll sound pretty good.
So he's Rami was his previous projector was an Epson. He's looking at the Epson 5030UB. What do we think of it?
I love it.
I am assuming he's gonna mount it in that soffit in the back of the room. I can't imagine that it's gonna go anywhere else. So I imagine it's gonna go there. So will it go
28 feet. Goodness,
28
I
feet?
would have to look that up. I mean, it can
That's the only thing.
obviously.
Hey, if you love Epsons and you want to have an Epson, all you need to do is find the Epson that will give you 120 inches at about 27 feet. If you consider
Let me see if I can
6.5 or
if I
so.
can find out.
Because you've got your projector, you've got your mount, you've got your connections in the back, plus you've got the body of the thing, plus and then add the lens. You're looking at about a foot to foot and a half off the back of that wall.
Right.
So you want to be within that range. So 26 and a
No, I
half.
mean that 5030 is selling for $2,000 these days. For that price range, not beating that.
Yeah.
So I mean that it's a terrific projector, just bar none. So I have zero problem getting on board with that one.
Right. It's just a matter of whether or not it can give you the right size. It probably
Okay. It can be as much as 25 feet away, lens to screen.
Nope. So not gonna happen.
Well, the thing is though, the screen might be slightly forward because it's
And
motorized.
the
So you
soffit, it's going to be. We don't know how deep the soffit is, or we're not assuming it's 18 inches, are we?
well, it sounds like it's 3 feet because he was saying that if he put the screen in front of the soffit, like mounted it actually to the face of the soffit instead of under the soffit.
Well, if you want a really clean install, which it sounds like he wants, I think he's probably more interested in mounting it towards the front of that soffit, but inside of it. So let's say 16 inch. No, it's going to be more like
2 feet,
14 inches. What?
14 inches. It's 3 feet deep. That soffit.
The soffit is 3 feet deep.
So that's what it's at because he said if he put it on the face of the soffit, the screen would
I
end up
missed
being
that.
3 feet in front of the speakers, and the
Well,
speakers are in wall in his scenario.
Well, that's 3 feet. Really, 3 foot soffit. It didn't look like it's a 3 foot soffit. Let me look at those pictures again.
Most soffits aren't 3 feet deep, but
I
it
think
could
that
be. Could be two
I
and a half
think
easily.
that what he means is that if they mounted it, yeah, it could be like 2.5.
Yeah, two and a half is common for a soffit because it looks like those are the square ducts running around in there.
Yeah, I think so.
So those
too.
are usually 2.5 feet.
Yeah. So then he's going to have to put another 6 inches in front of that in order to actually
Could
mount
be,
the
yeah.
thing. That's what I think he means.
It could be doable. If
You'll
you
have
put the
to look.
screen, yeah, if you put the screen more towards the front of the soffit and you were to mount the projector more or less just in front of the soffit, like a ceiling mount just in front of the soffit at the back,
Yeah.
it'll throw a 120-inch screen for that. Like I say, the lens at the most can be 25 feet away from the screen, so do plan on that. But it can be as close as 11'9" and as far as 25 feet. That is a big range, at least.
That is big.
With a 9-foot ceiling, there's no reason he can't ceiling mount that projector somewhere in that room.
I bet he doesn't want to though. I bet he wants it in the soffit. So I bet he doesn't.
I don't
want
even know if there's room in that soffit. It
There
might
might
be filled
not
with
be.
duct.
If that's it, then you'll be fine. Because if you have to mount it in front of the soffit, you're almost certainly going to be okay.
But it is just something to consider. So
Yeah. All right. Terry over on Facebook has an Oppo BDP95 that has been flawless for years until now. Discs work fine, but streaming apps and even the setup menu all flicker every few seconds. Restarting the apps can sometimes fix the flickering, but it comes back. Is there anything you should try as an easy fix before requesting a repair from Oppo? He also wants to know if it makes sense considering getting a BDP 105 when there's an Ultra HD Blu-ray model on the horizon. Um, if you haven't already factory reset it, I would factory reset it. I assume you've already done that. And if
I mean,
that
if
has,
discs are working and apps and the menu aren't, to me, that's something in the video processor, in which case you're not going to be fixing that.
yeah. So factory
So,
reset, turn it off and turn it back on again, and then call Oppo. That's what I would
yeah,
do.
because honestly, Oppo is a good company to deal with when it comes to having issues.
Yeah.
They're not one of these companies you have to be afraid of or that will never respond to you. If
Yeah.
you don't get a reply from their email, which I'm almost certain they will, they have live chat and they have their Twitter account, and their Twitter account is really responsive.
Yeah.
So you can definitely get in touch with them, and there's no reason not to, honestly. So hit them up.
Yeah, I will say that yesterday my Xbox One decided it didn't like the internet anymore, and
Eh.
it wasn't going on it. I'm done. Done with that. The whole internet thing, it's just full of porn. Not doing it anymore. So I struggled with it a little bit, and then I was like, well, I want to just watch Netflix. It's getting late. I'll flick it over to my PS3. Of course, I hadn't powered on my PS3 in months. So I powered on my PS3, and I had to do like a couple of updates, and Netflix had an update, and this had an update, and those updates on PS3 they just whiz by.
Mm.
So 35 minutes later, Netflix pops up, and I can finally watch Netflix. And I did a little search on the internet, and because these new gaming systems and a lot of new devices are kind of always on, you turn them off, you don't actually turn them off, you power them down to low power mode.
Yeah, stand by.
Stand by, even though you're pressing the button, turning it off. It's one of the recommendations was to go into the menu and hit restart. And I did that, and boop, works again. Turning it off, turning it on. Once again, the answer to all of life's little problems.
Yep. I just wanted to go back for that question for Rami. It is the Elite Screens Saker tab tensioned Acoustic Pro UHD 120-inch screen on Amazon, $1,100.
I think he was going to find it when he
Yeah.
looked for the one that was $1,100.
Exactly.
So,
And it actually conveniently, it's not a recessed in ceiling model, but it is a slimmer case. It's not like a big chunky 8-inch big case. It's like a 5-inch case. So honestly, all of that should fit what you were considering. It says it comes with 10 inches of additional drop, but you can set that to only come down like 1 inch if you wanted to. So
right.
yep, that's the
All right. Terry over on Facebook. I already said this. All right. He also wants to know. Oh wait. Blah, blah, blah.
yeah. So the
Do we think
105.
that he should be getting a 105? Well, first of all, I don't think you'll be in that that thing.
Yeah, I mean, I think he's replacing this 95, which is acting up a bit, with a 105, right?
Well,
I
I think he's going to call Oppo, and Oppo's going to take care of him, and that's going to
Yeah.
be the end of that. I wouldn't buy a 105 right now. I don't think.
I'd be hard pressed to ever buy a 105 period because there's the 103.
Right.
Which, I mean, unless you are using the analog audio outputs, there is no reason to get the 105.
Well, maybe
Oppo
he
themselves
is.
will tell you that they're identical.
Yeah, yeah, and that's that. It's the video side is all anything that's if you're connecting by HDMI,
Yeah,
then there's no point to buying the 105.
the 105,
You get the
none
103
whatsoever.
because that's the only thing they changed. Everything else is the same.
Yeah,
But I would probably just
I just get the 95 repaired, man.
that's what I would do.
Yeah.
And if I can't wait because I have to watch stuff, then I would go and pick up a cheap Blu-ray player someplace and
Yeah.
just have a backup. That's what I would do. And my parents got a Samsung, and it works pretty well from
Yep.
Sam's. So, and I haven't had any problems with it. Bill originally installed his in-wall surround and surround back speakers with the tweeters about 6'4" off the ground. He isn't happy with the results, and he wants to lower them since there are in-wall speakers. This is not a trivial task.
Yeah.
So he'd like to get it right in one try. He'd be happy to just tilt his in-wall and surround speakers if there's a way to do that. Hey man, there's a way to do anything if you're handy enough. You know who's not handy enough? This guy. All right. So if you have to ask me, then no, there is no.
I mean, you could build out your own manual box that
Yep,
would angle the speaker down. Whether that is more or less work than just drilling a new, punching a new hole, lowering it down, and patching the hole above it, I don't
it's
know.
more.
That
It's more work, is what it
it
is. In case
very
you're
well
wondering,
could be.
answer
and
that
then
question. It's more.
and then you have a thing sticking out of your wall. I'm assuming part of the reason for an in-wall speaker is that you wanted it flush to the wall and not speaking sticking out, because then you would have just gotten an on-wall speaker, which is essentially what you've built at that point, is an on-wall speaker, because you wouldn't want to like recess the bottom of the speaker into the wall. So the bottom of the speaker would be flush with the wall, and then the top would be sticking out to angle it down. So not really any easy way to angle it.
You could replace it with one of these ones that does that
Yes,
angling thing if you
that's
really
true.
want to. Looking at Dolby's new placement guidelines, they have the surround and surround back speakers right at seated ear level, not
Yeah,
elevated at all.
I know.
This does not make sense to Bill, as anyone sitting to the left or right of him would block the sound if the speakers were that low. So
Uh-huh.
where exactly should the tweeters of his in-wall speakers be? Exactly the same place we've always been saying. A couple of feet up, foot or so back, foot and a half, 2 feet back.
For
I
the
think that's
side
what,
surrounds, yeah.
for the side surrounds. Yeah,
And the surround backs. Now, I do agree with Dolby's recommendation of how far apart they should be, which is the same distance apart as your front, left, and right speakers.
yeah.
Because essentially now in the new immersive audio setups, your front speakers, any of the 5 potential overhead speakers, and the surround back speakers are all in a line together. They all line up. So if you are going to be repositioning your surround back speakers anyway, and you have the option, might as well have them the same distance apart as your front, left, and right speakers. But yeah, as for the elevation, I am completely in agreement with you, Bill. When I did my own experimentation in my own Atmos setup, it makes no sense to have the tweeters exactly at ear level. They do get blocked if you have someone sitting to the left or the
That
right
is
of you.
true.
Bill himself said what makes sense to him is to have clear line of sight to all the listeners, and that is bang on. That is
Yeah.
exactly what you want. You want clear line of sight from the tweeter. So if it's your left surround speaker over to your left, whoever is sitting farthest to the right should still have a clear line of sight from their left ear to the tweeter of the speaker. However high that needs to be in order to obtain that, that's more or less what you want. But yeah, if you basically get the tweeters 2 feet above your seated ear level, and certainly 6'4" is higher than that. So I can understand maybe not being quite, happy with that result. So generally, if you get them about the tweeter about 5 feet off the floor, that works really well.
Right. All right. Sean's big theater
There it
build
is.
project. Here we come.
Here we go.
We talked a little about Sean's basement home theater build last week. As requested, he's written back with a few more details. First, he's always completed a few house remodels and several kitchen and bathroom renovations, so the actual building and finishing process is familiar to him. So good.
Yes.
There'll be no surprises there. The room is 12 feet wide by 22 feet by 23 feet and
Yeah.
8 inches high. 8 feet
8 feet
high.
high.
Sorry,
8 inches high,
the
man.
inches. Yeah, it's a very so the John
Yeah.
Malkovich
No,
one.
22 feet, 10 inches long. So it's a little shy of 23 feet
Yeah,
long. Yeah.
so basically 12 by 23 by 8.
Yeah.
This is assuming standard drywall finishing, although he's planned on a double layer of drywall on the ceiling. This is a basement, right? Yes.
It is a basement.
The door is on the back of the wall and centered with 54 inches on either side of a 36-inch door.
Okay.
And he's giving us a napkin little drawing. He's
Yeah.
planning on having a bar area in the left rear corner,
This is
essentially.
sounding familiar.
I know, right? Essentially an L-shaped counter space against the back wall. He wants 2 rows of permanent seats, a couch for the back row, and D-box compatible theater seating for the main row. He's planning on the main row being 120 inches wide. So in order to have a 2-foot walkway, all of the seating starts right up against the left wall. If there's
Yeah.
room, he might put a beanbag chairs in the front of the main row. I'm gonna stop there because I want to talk about this.
Yes.
Looking at where he's got stuff, son of a, hold on, why won't this thing?
Even with the new computer, still problems opening images.
No, I don't know why it was opening stuff fine a second ago. There it is. Now the way he's kind of got this sort of laid out is that his main seating is actually going to be in front of the center line of the room. That's that D box extra
Right.
expensive seating will be just north or just in front of the midline of the room. The fact the back of those seats would be just in front of that. Now the seating behind that would be in that back third of the room. I am not sure why he wants to sit that close to that front, but I would recommend to start with switching that and putting the main seats back in the back third of the room and putting the seats for people he doesn't like as much in the front. And his seats could go up on the little platform, which it looks like he's sort of built there.
Yeah,
Uh,
it looks like he's planning on risers. In fact,
the whole
I mean,
thing is going to be on risers, it looks
yeah, like
like.
the main row of seats on a small riser, and then an additional riser at the back of that for the couch. Um, Now, my concern there is that if the primary row of seating is still 120 inches wide, that might just be the riser that he's building because that's what it looks like. Maybe the seating itself isn't quite that wide. But still, you want a walkway, and a 2 foot walkway is a very narrow walkway.
And he's not drawn this to scale, so it looks
No,
massive. But 2 feet, you people are walking sideways, dude.
almost.
Yeah,
Yeah. I mean, 3 feet is a standard walkway. So
yeah.
2 feet is acceptable. You can have a 2 foot walkway. It's just a very narrow walkway. I'm not sure I would want to have the rear of the walkway constricted that way, you know? I
Yeah.
might be more comfortable having what he's set out, which is the wider row of seats towards the front.
I think what he wants is he wants to have lights on the side of that platform.
Yeah.
It's what it looks like. I'm seeing like a little notches there. I'm wondering if those are supposed to be lights so that people can see and it looks a little bit more theater-esque.
Yeah.
If you're really into that sort of thing, just get some sconces on the walls that dim and all that stuff, and then you can have
But I mean,
that
we should
theater
talk a
look.
little bit about distances here because, you know, 23 feet essentially, just shy of 23 feet.
Right.
When you're talking about 2 rows of seating, perfectly adequate, but 2 rows of seating, possibly 3 rows of seating, because he's talking about beanbag chairs in front and a bar. Now we're getting really squishy.
No, yeah, I
Um,
agree.
Now, I mean, he's not building, it doesn't look like he's planning to build a full bar. It looks like he's planning to build essentially a snack table at the back, you know, maybe a little mini fridge in there or something like that with drinks, but it's essentially an L shaped counter space at the back. That could be 6 feet. It doesn't have to be like a standard bar is 8 to 10 feet,
He's got
right?
it butted right up against the door. If you
Yeah.
see it's 54.5, it's almost right against that door.
Yeah.
So, and it's
So,
L-shaped, and I don't know how far into the room it's going to go.
well, that's what I mean. That's what I'm talking from the back of the room. So I'm thinking he could have 6 feet. You'd want to add another couple of feet to that just for, you know, a walkway behind the seats. So let's say we're 8 feet into the room now, right?
Yeah,
So we've subtracted 8 feet from 23. So we got 15 feet left. Each row of seats needs 6 feet, right?
that gives you 3 feet at the front. That's your stage that
Yeah.
he has marked out there. So that front row of seats is actually much closer to
I mean, the
being.
front row of seats is conceivably only 9 feet from the screen, eyes to screen,
Yeah,
the main row. So I mean, I'd be thinking that that main row of seats is between 9 and 10 feet from the screen.
yeah.
You know,
Which means
realistically, that's what
you're
you're looking
looking.
at, Sean.
If you're worried about what those people are seeing, if that's going to be your seats,
Yeah,
then you're not looking at much bigger than anywhere from an 80 to a 92-inch screen. Anything bigger than that, and it's going to be you're going to be turning your head to see. To be
a
like
lot.
sit,
Yeah,
yeah, you'll be sitting too close, and then you're how wide is it? It's 14. No, what is it?
the
Six.
width,
The width's
12
12,
feet,
12
12
feet,
feet wide.
which actually wouldn't look too bad up there. It gives you a little bit of room on either side for speakers.
Yeah,
Uh, with an 80-inch screen. So you're probably going to want to look into either an acoustically transparent or you're not going to have a ton of room in the front there for speakers on either side. So yeah, I don't know what I'm saying. I don't know. I mean, it's just that bar is kind of messing everything up for us, Sean.
it could be.
Is there how I see it says bar snacks. Is that what it says?
Yeah,
In which
bar
case, does it
slash
have
snacks.
to be L-shaped? Because if it's not L-shaped, then you can scoot everything back, and maybe you
Yeah,
can have a little bit of bar on both sides. How about that? How about you take that L shape and put on the other side, that the L part, and put on the other side of the door? And you can have like the kids bar, right? With the kids snacks and the juice boxes and the little cooler form, and the other side's like the adult one
right.
with the hard liquor and porn. And then there's just a couple of stools against that back wall, and you can kind of talk with your friends, and then that sort of thing. I mean, if you're just going to have it against the wall anyways, then you can more center your seating, put one platform for your back seats, which again are going to be the D box seats. I still think that you need to put those there, and then that gives you a lot more room to play with here, and you can get a bigger screen
I
if you
mean,
really want a bigger screen.
the
And
advantage of having his primary row of seats, let's just say they're going to end up 10 feet from eyes to screen,
yeah,
right? The advantage there is that let's say he wants to go whole hog and he wants a 45-degree field of view, which
right.
honestly isn't insane.
No,
That's perfectly fine. A 110-inch screen, 16 by 9, gives you that. Now, the nice thing about a 110-inch screen from 10 feet away is that in a 12-foot wide room, that gives you it gives you 2 feet on either side of the screen for your speakers. So if you put a little bit of acoustic treatment on the side walls, that all fits nicely. The numbers start to line up, right? So he's saying he likes a really big screen experience. To me, 45-degree field of view is a really big screen experience. I'm saying a 110-inch screen, which it sounds like he was thinking bigger, but we got to be realistic about the width
no,
of
you're
your
not going to get
room.
bigger than 110. Or you're not going to, or you're going to have to go acoustically transparent. Has to drop down in front of the speakers. That's the only thing you'll be
Yeah,
able to do
yeah.
because you won't
Which
have any room for their speakers.
That's right. Yeah. And given the speakers that he was considering, which we're coming up to in a bit, which I have no problem with the ones he's considering, it all starts to work quite nicely if you go with a 110-inch screen size and your primary row seats is 10 feet away. So I actually, again, I don't have a problem with his primary row seats being the front row of seats
Well,
with a 10-foot viewing distance.
acoustically, it's not the best.
But at
And
least he's not dead center. He's in front of the center of the room,
right,
which is fine. That's fine.
technically, yeah.
Yeah.
All right, whatever. I lost the
Well,
question.
we're working it out, Sean. You know,
We are
if
working
these
it out.
ideas are sounding reasonable to you, that's the whole idea. Because you know, honestly, the thing he's most concerning about is pre-wiring. But we do have to start nailing down the plan of the overall theater so that you can, because what's important are distances. Because when you're saying, hey, I'm going to have junction boxes or electrical outlet boxes here, 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 and here, we need to know what distances we're working with, and that starts to dictate what equipment is going to fit in there. And then speaker choices are a part of that because we say, well, are we going to have an acoustically transparent screen? If we do, we need space behind it to accommodate the speakers that are going to go behind it. And then the screen can't be crazy large because then if it's not acoustically transparent and the center speaker is below the screen, it can't be on the ground. That's not going to sound good, or
Right.
against the ceiling. So, you know, it all does, it's a very holistic thing, and there is a little bit of give and take. You know, you decide on one side of it, and then a few pieces fall into place around that one decision. So if we can come to an understanding of our primary row seat's going to be 10 feet from eyes to screen, and the screen's going to be 110 inches, now we're off to the races. We can make a
Right.
whole bunch of decisions based off of that. So,
All right. He'd like to have a. Did I move? Did I go too far? No. Okay. The last thing I would say is, if you can give a more than 2 feet for the walkway, if that 120 inches
mm,
that you're planning for that platform, if that's at all got some leeway. I mean, once your couch is on there, I mean, if you're really worried about the couch falling off for one reason or another, just bolt it to the stupid thing that's down. I mean, just put
yeah,
screws in it, so it doesn't move.
even
Uh,
2.5 feet is far preferable to 2 feet.
Yes, 2 feet with a bar and drunk people is not a good combination,
Yeah.
Sean. I just want to point that
I mean,
out.
2.5 feet can be a standard door, right?
Yeah,
You know, a 30-inch door.
yeah,
That's fine. But a
yeah.
2 foot door, a 24-inch door, that's a squishy door.
That's
So
a squishy door. That's right.
they
How big?
exist.
How big are your friends?
They
That's the
exist. But a
real
30-inch
question.
door, that's fine. So if you can get that walkway to, 30 inches, yeah.
Now the
But I
big
mean,
back chairs at the front of the room, I got no problems with that. I assume children will sit on that, and they don't
yeah,
care. They're
that screen's going to be
fine.
huge to them.
Yeah.
But that's all right. Yeah.
Anyways, he'd like to have all of his theater gear in a rack under his stairs. That's where there's stairs in the back room, right?
I'm
The
not sure. I
door
mean,
is in the back, is centered in the back of the theater, so it's back there,
yeah,
right? Okay.
I would think so.
Okay. That's what let him consider using Cat 6 switching for his HDMI connections. Why?
Yeah, this was a little bit confusing. A little later on, he's considering having like a Control 4 system for some home automation, light control and things like that. No problem with that. I
No
will say
problem with that.
Control 4, by and large, is usually a custom installer type of thing.
Not just usually. I don't know any way that you can get it without it, to be honest with you.
Yeah. So honestly, the thing to do there, if that's what I got, zero beef with that as a choice. But you would want to talk to a custom installer who does Control 4 before you really move forward with that.
Right.
So Yeah, what
But if your gear is going to be under the stairs at the
right.
back of the room, and your projector is going to be just above that, your HDMI run is going to be what, like 6 feet, 8 feet, 10 feet, 15 feet? That's not a long run.
Yeah.
That's nothing to be concerned about. You get a
Or
decent
if you
cable.
do want to run Cat 6 just to the projector, you don't need all of the switching to be Cat 6. You know, all of the switching from the sources into your AV receiver or processor, that
And
can
it'll
all
be
be HDMI as standard. Then you can just either get a receiver that already has HD base T output, because there are a handful of them that do, or you just get one of the Balins, one of the things that converts a standard HDMI output
I
to
don't see
Cat 6.
why.
Well, the thing is, we don't know exactly where these stairs he's talking about are. I mean, for all
It
intents
could
and
be on the third
purposes,
floor of his McMansion.
yeah, I mean, for all intents and purposes, what we're talking about is he wants all the gear out of the room in a closet, in a second room, whatever it is. And sometimes that does necessitate a long run to the projector into the room, or if this was going to be a flat panel on the front wall, that would be a very long run. But
Right.
they have the little boxes that just take the HDMI output from your AV receiver or processor that's doing all the HDMI switching and just turns it into Cat 6. Now, he mentions a little later on he wants to consider uh, high dynamic range. Now, this whole project, he's like, the theater probably isn't going to be done for a year. So, when it comes to high dynamic range on a projector, this is an excellent time to wait,
Yeah.
right?
Unless
Because
you've
there
got like
will,
30 grand just lying
yeah,
around.
yeah. I mean, there's that $60,000 Sony laser one. That's fantastic, but that exceeds your entire budget, so that's probably not on the table. I mean, if you were buying a high dynamic range projector today, I'd be looking at the JVCs primarily, which are
Yeah.
not actually using a 4K panel. It's a 1080p panel, but they wiggle it back and forth, and it looks like 4K, and it accepts 4K, and it accepts HDR10. It does not accept Dolby Vision at this time. We don't know if they can be upgraded to accept Dolby Vision. Maybe they can, maybe they can't. We don't know. But the thing is, in a year's time, we're going to have a new crop of projectors announced. I guarantee you this HDR stuff will be more settled in a year's time. And if what you're worried about is where you're going to position for your pre-wiring and your ceiling mount and things like that, I have very little worry that Sony, Epson, and JVC will suddenly bring out all their HDR projectors with vastly different throw ranges from their current models. Like they have never in their history ever done that unless it's like a completely new model series that specifically mentions, hey, we're short throw now or something like that.
Right.
And you know those are going to be your primary ones because you're looking at the mass market models. I mean, Epson's LS10000 that they have right now, it can do the DCI-P3 color gamut thanks to using lasers to illuminate, but it can't do HDR. So it's halfway there, but maybe next year's model, the one coming out in 2016, will do both. So it's a great time to wait, but you can still plan ahead. If you basically take the throw distances that the Epson LS10000, one of the Sonys like the 550 that just came out, or the JVCs, if you go to Projector Central and use their projector distance calculators for any of those models, you can plan off of that. All of them overlap, all of them have long zoom ranges, and I absolutely do not think that is going to change in the future. So you can plan that out. The consideration with using an Ethernet connection, a Cat 6 connection to run the video, is that almost all of the converters that I see right now that take HDMI and turn it into Cat 6 are limited to 10.2 gigabits. They're still on that standard, and HDR requires 18 gigabits. So there are some proposals that for HDR, you might need two Cat 6 wires. It might still be one box, but you might need to run it through two Cat 6 wires instead of one. So that's another thing to wait on, but it doesn't prevent you from running the Ethernet. Like running two Ethernet cables to where your projector is going to be instead of one, really not a problem when you have
Yeah.
no drywall up. So that's something to do.
Yeah. All right. So his biggest concern right now is how he should pre-wire for power and speaker placement.
Yeah.
This will be a year-long project. The whole basement is being finished, and the theater will be last. But the wiring affects the rest of the renovation, so that's the most pressing issue. He's considering a control for home automation system. He hasn't fully decided on lighting either. So all of these electrical concerns where he'd like to start.
Okay.
Okay. So let's talk about well, he hasn't said anything about whether or not he wants immersive audio, right?
He has. He's interested in immersive audio. Yeah.
Okay, well then that makes it easy.
Yes.
Uh, so for subwoofers, given the current layout of this theater, which Rob has already kind of said that you can get away with
Hmm.
sitting as close as you've kind of got things and all of that, though you do really need to draw something to scale. You absolutely do because the drawing that you have here, I think, is very misleading as what to expect because if that's 2 feet on the right side of that thing, then
Hmm.
you know
I
I
mean,
can
going by the
fly.
math, it has to be, right? So,
Well, it does, but it's actually that platform's in line with his back door, which means it's actually 54.5 inches on the other side of that thing. So it's
right. Yeah. Yeah.
according to his drawing. So draw
Yeah.
something to scale so you can actually see it or have somebody else draw it
Hmm.
so that you can see where your speaker placements are going to be. Okay. So for speaker placements, or actually for subwoofer placements, front left corner, right back corner, those where you want a power
Completely
outlet
agree.
and a cat run, some sort of
Oh, just a RCA cable
RCA
run would
cable
be
on
fine.
there. Okay.
Yeah.
Those two things you'll need in the front left and the back right corner.
Hmm.
Okay. For speakers, again, you need to tell us, well, we're going to get the speakers in a second, but you'll have to pre-wire those if you're going to have them in wall. I have them drop it from the ceiling all the way down with a pool of speaker wire inside the wall right there. Inside the wall waiting for you to grab it or for them to do something with it in the locations where you decide. Same
Yeah.
thing with the surround speakers, which you'll have to that which will only be able to decide just the way we said before. It depends on what you plan on doing. With 2 rows of seats you could wire 2 speakers in parallel
Hmm.
or in series, and I would put those one basically by the front seat, one basically by the back seat, a couple of feet up, you
Yep.
know
Couple of feet
and
up and maybe just slightly back, like more or less in line with the back of the seat itself. So it would be
yes.
just slightly behind your head in either row. And it does sound like that's what he wants to do. It sounds like he wants
And
to
that's what you
have,
want on both
yeah, both
walls.
sides.
Okay. Again, I am not going to advocate having surround backs in here because of the bar area, but if you do decide to do that, you can. This is
Yeah. I
probably
mean,
close enough that it's not so bad, but you got to remember, Rob, he's sitting, his primary seat is going to be over half the room away.
that's true. Yeah,
His
that's true.
primary seat is going to be over half the room
But it's only
away.
going to be 6 feet behind the rear row. So,
But he's not going to calibrate it for the rear row.
yeah,
The main calibration is going to be at his seat, which is going to put those. So I would do 5.2 point, and you could
for
go ahead and wire for 5 if you really wanted to, right?
what? Like voice of God?
Boys, I mean, why not? You can wire for it. It's a speaker run. It costs not. It
That's
can't
true.
cost that much, right?
That's true.
And what I would do is I would have your use the normal labeling system you do, or just say this is A, this is B, this is C, this is D, and have them drop those down to wherever your gear is going to be.
Yeah, yeah, that
Okay,
under the stairway
under the
placement.
stairway, and have them make sure they label all those wires. I mean, you can figure out what they are. It's not that hard once they're wired up to a speaker. It's really
Yeah,
easy to do, but just for sanity's sake, because you're gonna have like a billion speakers up there, and have them pre-wire all that stuff. And then if you really want to be proactive about it, you can have them either put a little box up there or put a box on the wall if you aren't going to have them immediately install the speakers like your surrounds your Atmos speakers. If you can have them put a box there that just has the extra wire just kind of curled up in there, and then you paint
right.
the cover so it looks like the ceiling, and you're good to go. Now,
Yeah, so I wanted to mention a little bit on the construction side
right
because we brought up the topic of soundproofing. He's not super concerned about like having it dead silent throughout the rest of the house. He's like, if it
before
makes
we
a little
finish
noise. Oh, sorry.
Before
Go
we go
ahead. Yeah.
into that, let's finish the wiring for the projector. So you're going to need to run to your projector. What you don't want is them to put an outlet up there. What you want them to do is to put something that you plug from your projector into it, and it runs that power through an RCA. I'm not sorry, through Romex down to wherever your gear is, and it has a plug that then, just like your power plug, how it plugs into the back of your projector, it
Hmm.
has an outlet there just like that. So you plug a second power plug into that. So basically, you put an in-wall extension cord from your projector
Right.
back down to your gear, which you will then plug into your battery backup.
Yeah, Sanus has those. Yeah, so like in the stairway, what you would actually see on the wall, instead of a regular female wall outlet, it would actually be a male wall connection.
Yeah,
So you would have a regular power cord that would go from your battery backup unit, a regular power that will then into this male wall outlet that's under your stairs. Then there's Romex running through the wall over to where your projector is, and a regular female outlet there. That way, you don't have to have an actual battery backup on the ceiling next to your projector. Your battery backup can be under the stairs with the rest of your gear, and this is a way of just connecting the projector to that instead.
very cleanly. Okay. And then if you're really considering running Cat 5,
Mm-hmm.
you're going to want to run at you. I
Run
mean,
three.
well,
Run three,
yeah,
because one of them could be for control, right? If he's going to use control 4, he might as
or
well
just
use
yeah,
IP control.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
So run three of them, because two of them might be needed for the signal to get 18 gigabits per second, and the third one could just be for IP
But
control.
tell us how long that run's going to be, because we might just say
Eh,
do HDMI,
yeah, run
run
HDMI.
one, and one for control, and that's it. Then you'll be good.
Yeah. Now, yeah. So a couple of things I want to get into. So first of all, the thing he said with the soundproofing, he was saying he's not hugely concerned if he can hear it a little bit in the rest of the house. That's fine. Usually, he and his wife are in the theater together watching movies, so he's not hugely worried about it.
Okay.
Another reason I'm not hugely worried is if this was standard drywall. Maybe consider 5/8 inch drywall instead of half-inch drywall. That's easy enough to do. But the thing is, if you ever want to add a second layer with green glue in between, you can. There's nothing preventing you from throwing up a second layer of drywall with some green glue in between after the fact, if you decide later on that you want better soundproofing. So it is possible to retrofit. If you are thinking you'd like to do it ahead of time, highly recommend getting in touch with soundproofingcompany.com. We pointed Scott S. over there, and he got great plans from them, put them into effect, and he's super happy with the results. He's like, I can turn it up to reference volume, can't hear it in the rest of my house. It's very cool. So if that's a consideration, but the one thing I would do either way, because you don't have to do 2 layers of drywall with green glue in between. You really don't if you're not concerned about it. But do seal up that room. That's a benefit in every single way. It's a benefit for your base in that you don't have air escaping. It's a huge benefit for soundproofing in that often it's not so much the heaviness and the thickness of your walls, it's actually the flanking noise, which is sound escaping around the electrical boxes, around where your speaker wire is coming out of the wall. So seal everything up. Acoustic sealant is cheap. So there's no reason not to get a pile of tubes of acoustic sealant and just seal up all the gaps. If you want to install things like your speaker wire and your Ethernet cables inside electrical boxes, because you don't have to. You don't have to put electrical boxes
No,
around
we
those
don't.
things. But if you want to, you certainly can, and you can use the putty. There's these putty pads. You can get those at soundproofingcompany.com, or you can just get putty from Home Depot, and you just putty over the back of those, and that seals things around that electrical box to the drywall. So that's something I would definitely recommend doing that he hadn't mentioned, because it's not tremendously expensive. It won't add a ton to the budget, and it has a really good impact on the effects in your room. Mainly, that sound will not get into your theater as easily
Yeah.
from outside.
The thing that I would look at too is just insisting that they put insulation in the walls, because I'm
Yeah,
not.
he already mentioned that he's gonna have fiberglass insulation in all the
And
walls.
that's a really easy thing to do. It's
Yeah,
super cheap, and if they've got
yeah.
the walls open, you can do it yourself.
Oh
The
yeah,
only
yeah.
it has the only real implication is the wires coming down through the walls. Get harder to fish and get to.
Well,
But
that's
since
the
you're going to
next
have
thing I
them,
wanted to mention. Yeah.
yeah, if you're going to have them already there, it's fine. But the insulation makes a massive, massive difference,
Yeah.
simply because it's just adding just mass for the
Yeah.
sound to go through before it can come out. Now, I can hear stuff in my home theater with the door closed and it's up at reference volume. If I want to be able to hear what's actually going on in here, I have to be sitting within 3 feet of the door.
Hmm.
Once I get further away than that, it's just sort of a noise, and I will hear the really big bass hits from
Yeah,
the
like there's
kitchen.
something happening in there.
Now, my kitchen almost kind of shares a wall with
Hmm.
this. It's very, very close. So from my kitchen, it's only the really big stuff that I can hear.
Okay.
But and that's, I mean, for me, that's more than good enough.
Yeah.
That's more than good enough.
Yeah, and it probably will be for Sean too. So yeah, that's why I'm not sweating it, but just throwing it out there because
Yeah.
if you're gonna do it, you might as well do it at the beginning. But what is worthwhile, hugely worthwhile, is conduit. Conduit, conduit,
Oh,
conduit.
right, right,
Instead
right,
of
right.
running bare speaker wire, because there's plenty of in wall speaker wire that you can run. Another thing, run 14.4 speaker wire.
Right. It's
Hugely
flexible.
beneficial because then if you ever need to change something, you essentially have two runs of speaker wire now already in the wall. But run all of that stuff inside of conduit, especially your HDMI runs, your Ethernet runs, any of that stuff, because then if you ever need to pull a different wire through, if you ever have a wire break and you need to replace it, fishing a loose wire through the wall is like it's death, man. Like you might as well just start over. It's such a pain. But if you have conduit in there, you tie one end to the new end and you just pull it on through. It makes life so much simpler. And when the walls are open, it's so easy to do. So wherever you're going to have anything that isn't Romex, put it in conduit because it is so worthwhile.
Yeah. That's a good suggestion too.
Yeah, and
What you
cheap. I mean,
and
that's
cheap.
not
Well,
that's cheap.
yeah. It's not that
It adds
expensive.
cost, but it's so worth it.
All right, in the home theater gear side of things, he wants to know if you should decide on gear ahead of time or only worry about wiring for right now. He wants an immersive audio system and a very large screen with a projector with decent HDR features. We've already talked about that.
Yeah.
So far, he's been using Monster THX Select speakers that he has not been fully satisfied with. He's heard Golden Ear and Def Tech demos and thought they sounded great. He's leaning towards Golden Ear right now.
Okay.
Uh, those are both fine companies. Yeah, what you should be worried about right now is where you're going to put your speakers
Yes.
and making sure that of what type of speakers you're going to want. And
Right.
what I mean by that is in wall,
Mm-hmm.
on wall, in room. Okay. If you know you're going to want a particular type of speaker, that tells you where you're going to run your speaker wires. You need to draw your room to scale or see what if most of the time, so with these things, you have to work with architects. So whoever you're having draw this thing, get your drawing to scale and say, I want a speaker here, I want a speaker here, I want it to be this high, and you have to think about this. Okay. I'm sitting, sit on the couch. The couches will normally tell you, the dimensions of the couch, and I want it to be this high off the couch and this many inches back.
Mm-hmm.
And you got to factor in your riser and everything else. So you need to have those dimensions down, because if they're pre-wiring, they'll tell them exactly where to pre-wire it. They pre-wire for that, and then you'll be right. Then you can worry about speakers. Worries about
Yeah.
speakers far after that. The last thing you should be doing right now is shopping for speakers or projectors, as far as I'm concerned. Once you get your dimensions right, and don't double check it, don't triple check it, quadruple check it. Stay up late at nights checking it. Redo the math every single time, because I guarantee you're gonna find something you're gonna go, oh, why did I do that? That thing is practically on the ceiling now. I mean, if you just eyeballing it is not good enough. Just eyeballing it is not good enough.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, he's looking for some recommendations in terms of speakers and receivers, subwoofers, all of that.
It's going to change in the next 6 months, anyways.
It could, but I mean, speakers are less likely to change than the
Right.
projector. I mean, the projector, I almost guarantee you won't be buying one that's out right this second. There's no point in buying one right this second because you don't have room to put it in. You might as well wait the year, because HDR will be more settled in a year's time. On the speaker side, first of all, if you've heard the Golden Ears and you're leaning that way and you really like them, and he's already looking at a super center with some Triton towers up front, and then whatever works for their surround speakers, be they bookshelves or on walls, and then their in-ceiling speakers for the Atmos channels. I'm like, I can get on board with that, no problem. I have no beef with that if you like their sound. I've heard them. I like their sound. I don't think they're perfectly linear, but I like their particular character. And if you like it too, zero problem. I will say, you have some time. You're not going
Yeah.
to be finishing this until a year. Do some more listening. I would again mention Kef. I really like their in-ceiling speakers. One thing he wanted to know is, if he's only worrying about wiring right now, or if there's something about the speakers or other gear he should consider. One thing to consider is backer boxes for those in-ceiling speakers, or backer boxes if you're going to have in-wall speakers for the surrounds. Because like Kef, they sell metal backer boxes with some insulation inside them that can be pre-mounted inside the ceiling
Right,
joists,
right.
and then you drywall over them and just drill a little hole, and then you have a really nice metal container, so you're not worrying about soundproofing. It's already contained, it's already the full metal bracket that's in there to give you a really solid connection. So that's nice to do ahead of time. So listen to some Kef speakers, because like the Q series or the R series, both might be affordable to you. One thing I would consider, this is going to be a projection setup. Consider whether you want glossy speakers or non-glossy speakers, because sometimes those finish options aren't always available. Tom doesn't think glossy matters at all, but some people really care about having a matte finish. So, like
The
the
only
Kef
time I
R
ever notice
series
my
are all
speakers
glossy.
being glossy is when I'm walking in the room and I see them from the side and I see the screen reflecting off of them. 90% of the time, I don't even see it. I don't
Yeah.
see it. I'm seeing black speaker grill, you know, looking at me. So
But I want to get back to the power outlets, because that's honestly the thing that's affecting the rest of his basement renovation more than anything else, because he has to run stuff to the panel, right? I would
right.
really recommend put at least one dedicated 20 amp circuit to wherever
Yeah,
your gear is going to be, which is under the stairs. Now,
that's just a case.
Ray's going to chime in here and tell us to have like six 20 amp circuits. It's
Yeah, but Ray's
not
a
really
maniac.
necessary. but
One
do
is just in case you want to buy a
a
big old lamp.
big amp.
Yeah,
Yeah.
amp someday they're gonna tell you need like you don't need to put a 30 watt in there.
You shouldn't.
That's
30 amp, yeah.
the 30 amp. I mean, yeah,
But yeah,
that's
one
just
one
ridiculous.
one dedicated 20 amp run to where your gear is going to be, really good idea. Um, an outlet in each corner of the room, really good idea, so that you have something to plug your subs into. That's just regular 15 amp. They don't have to be totally dedicated, although it doesn't hurt. But have an outlet in the ceiling where your screen is going to be if you want to have a motorized drop down screen.
Yes, that's the one I forgot.
Yeah, have that electrical, basically extension cord plug where your projector is going to be. That's going to the stairs. We already talked about that.
You might want to consider having an outlet wherever you're near where your speaker wire is for your main speakers. If you're considering
Exactly.
deaf techs, they often have to be plugged in.
Yeah. And those don't have to all be dedicated. They're not drawing crazy amounts of power. But more outlets in a theater is better than not enough, or having to traipse a long power cord
Yeah.
somewhere that would get underfoot or something like that. And with his D-box seats, I'm sure he's already thought I want outlets that are completely separate from anything that's going to plug into your audio or video gear, because those things have motors, and motors generate piles of noise,
Yeah.
and you want those motors on a completely dedicated circuit. It wouldn't hurt for that to be a 20 amp circuit too, because those D-box chairs draw a lot of current. So that would be worthwhile as another dedicated 20 amp circuit for your D-box chairs. That should cover most of your electrical power needs if you do things that way. The other one is have your lighting on a separate circuit too, because it sounds like if
Yes.
it's Control 4, you'll probably have dimmers. You don't want anything with a dimmer on the same as your audio or video equipment. So all your lighting should be on a separate
I
circuit.
don't know where your router is, but you need to make sure that you've got a dedicated Ethernet run to underneath where your
Mm-hmm.
gear is for your route, to run back to your router. You don't want to go wireless, um, if you can help it. Uh, so I would definitely do that.
Yeah, Ray just chimed in. He's like, do at least two 20 amp circuits. It's like, it
Oh,
won't
great.
cost much more than one, but do at least two. We
Uh,
he wants us to say six. Um, but I mean that should cover most of your electrical needs. The other concern he had was if he does a Control 4 system, he might want to have RS-232 control or IR extenders or things like that. Again, conduit. That's really all you need. Because if you have a conduit that goes towards where your screen is going to be, and you know what, have a drop down on either side of the screen, because we don't necessarily know, depending on the model, where the IR sensor or the RS-232 plug is going to be. It might be on either side of the screen. It's easy enough to run a conduit drop to both sides of the screen. Run a conduit drop to your projector, because that's essentially the only equipment that's going to be in the theater that will need to receive a signal. And that
now,
way, if it's Ethernet run, an RS-232 run, an IR run, whatever, you can pull it through the conduit.
what you want to do too with that conduit, if you can, is you want to have a pull cord
A
in
little
there.
string in there, yeah, already in there, yeah.
So if you have the way they do that, like is I mean, I don't know. I'm sure there's all sorts of ways they can do it, but basically, what you want to do is you tie. If you have another cord to pull, you tie it onto the string. Then you tie another string onto the exact same spot, and
Mm-hmm.
you pull it through.
Yep.
You just keep pulling until it comes out. Then you untie the first one, store it back, and you've got a new one there. Then you untie
Then,
that, let it just
then you
hang.
always have a string
You
inside the
always
conduit.
have a string inside there, and that way
Yeah.
you can always pull another cable if you need to.
Yeah.
So
Conduit
that's
is
good.
like the best. It's the
They
best
are
when you
they
need
are
to
going
pull
to look at
something.
you like you're a maniac when you suggest such things, but explain to them the reason and explain it again, explain it again,
Yeah, no,
explain
if
it
you just say, I'm going to have a wire going from here to here, but in the future, I might need a different wire, they'll be like, yeah, have a conduit.
again. Yeah,
It's like a gazillion times easier than opening the walls up again.
should be fine. All right. So
I think
that
that's pretty
was
good. That should be a pretty good start for him
yeah. Let us know. Keep
or
us
for anyone.
informed. Give us another email if you want to update us on stuff.
Yeah,
All right, that's 2 hours with
it
only
sure
like
is.
5 questions.
It
Jeez.
worked out. It worked out so nicely.
It did. All right. Once again, let's thank our. Oh, wait a second. I got off the thing.
Ah,
Let's thank our listeners of the week who are not in that direction. They are
scrolling up.
Todd and Herb for the donations. Thank you guys.
Thank you very much, gentlemen. Appreciate those
And
donations.
Tony and Corey. And oh, I'm sorry, I forgot to mention Kevin. Kevin is also our listener of the week. He spotted us on the AVS Forums SVS survey contest. It's like, how did you hear of
Yeah,
us, or something like that, or
yeah.
stuff like that. So we actually got mentioned along with a bunch of other people, but we were on there. So Kevin, thank you for pointing that out to us as
Yeah,
well.
thank you, Kevin.
All right. If you want to get your question answered on the podcast, now that you have brand new gear for Christmas and you're
Mhm.
going, this is not working the way, turn it off, turn it back on. This is still not working. Reset it. Oh. Give us an email at rob@avrant.com, tom at avrant.com. You can go to www.avrant.com and press on the buy us a cup of coffee link to leave us a donation.
Mhm.
You can go to
Email
Facebook.
question at
Oh,
avrant.com for
question
sure
AV
if you
Rant.
want to be
That's right.
on the podcast. Question at avrant.com goes to our
That's
producer.
right. You can also go to facebook.com/avrant podcast. At First Reflect, that's Twitter for Rob, and at avrant_Tom for me. At Austin Pond, Ostenti and Pond for Austin, our producer. He also has his own podcast. It is the We Watch Movies podcast. It's actually a music podcast. It's no talking. It's like a radio station, but it only lasts for 13 minutes. So specifically 13 minutes. I don't know why. I don't know why that's the way it is, but we watch movies. It's 13-minute long podcast once a week.
It's what Beats music should be.
That's what it should be.
Yeah. In all honesty, joking aside, I'm looking forward to their Star Wars Force Awakens episode, which I'm
Ooh,
sure is
I want to be on that episode. Awesome. I want to be on that one.
Might be too late. They might be recording it as we speak. Who knows?
Probably are. For AV Rant, I'm Tom Mantring.
And I'm Rob H. Now go out and listen to something, and Happy New Year!
Whee! All right, guys. After party in a few.